1.
Good evening, and welcome to the Monday, June 21st meeting of the Select Board of Long Meadow. This is Select Board Chair Tom Lacusa. I will be confirming that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mark Strange.
Here.
Steve Morantz.
Here.
Mark Gold.
Here.
Okay, I received an email that Richard Foster was not going to be joining us. This would have been his last meeting. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Lynn Simmons.
Here.
Paul Pasturzik.
Here.
Mike Barbieri. All right. So an introduction to this meeting. This open meeting of the Long Meadow Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. This meeting is convened by Zoom webinars posted on the agenda and the town website, identifying how the public may join. There is no chat or Q&A function. All the materials for this meeting are available on the agenda posted on longmeadow.org. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. Each vote taken at this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. This meeting will feature resident comment. For resident comment, using the Zoom webinar format, members of the public are attendees. If a member of the public would like to speak during the resident comment, please use the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen. The meeting moderator will promote you to a panelist, unmute you, and give you permission to speak. If you joined the webinar by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute. Residents who wish to speak will identify their names and addresses only. Each individual is afforded 3 minutes for comment. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some of the attendees are participating by video conference. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. That is an abbreviated version of what we've been using, and it should cover all of our needs. And this session is being recorded. So the first thing we have is announcements. Lynn, would you want to address those?
Sure. A reminder of the annual town election tomorrow, Tuesday, June 22nd. In-person voting will be at the community house. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And if you need information on the ballot, you can find it at longmeadow.org. Converse Street Sewer Improvement Project. The work is expected to begin on June 28th and will continue for about 3 to 4 weeks. They will work the week of the 28th and they will take a break the week of the 4th of July, and they'll be back July 12th. The work includes removal and replacement of the sanitary sewer manholes, sanitary service connections, and trench patch on a section of Converse Street between Laurel Street and Dover Road. The project will involve the necessary closure of Converse Street during work hours with traffic detours to accommodate the construction. So it's anticipated right now that Converse Street between Laurel and Dover will be closed between 7:30 in the morning and 4 p.m. in the afternoon. We will be doing a townwide reverse 911 call, and detour signs will be going up Monday. We've worked with Waste Management, Pioneer Valley Transit Authority, and East Long Meadow to help with the detour routes. And I do have the DPW director joining later, so if you had any questions specific to this, we could have him address that. The sidewalk improvement projects are expected to begin soon. Campora Construction was contracted to do the work. The main project is the 2021 sidewalk replacement, includes sections of Severn, Windsor Place, Benedict, Durham, Winona, Woolworth, Duxbury, Redfern, Maple, Avondale, George Washington, Wolf Swamp, Shaker, Fairway, and Longfellow. That information is all on longmeadow.org. And a reminder about the new DPW ribbon cutting and grand opening celebration. It's scheduled for Thursday, June 24th at 2 o'clock at the new DPW facility at 170 Dwight Road. All are encouraged to attend. We'll have light refreshments, guided tours of the facility. That's it for announcements tonight, Tom.
Thank you. Next, we would have resident comments if there are any. Lynn, has anyone indicated?
Yes, I have 3 right now, so I'll go down the list in order. I have Marie Angelides. I'll move over to make a panelist.
So Marie, if you could start with your name and address.
Hi, today is Paul Pasturzic's last day on the select board or a select board meeting, and I couldn't let this pass. Congratulations, Paul, on your retirement. You're going to love it. During the 9 years on the select board, we had 5 town managers, and that included interim town managers. And at one point, we didn't even have a town manager, which Paul pointed out to us. And you kept the ball rolling during all of that. Through all the crises, whether a political or a natural disaster, your steady hand brought us balanced budgets, and you kept increasing our rating with Moody's. I can't thank you enough, Paul. It was a great honor and a joy to work with you through the years. Thank you for your years of service. Longmeadow will never know how much we owe you, but thank you very much and enjoy your retirement.
Thank you, Marie. That's very kind of you.
Good night.
Okay.
And
next speaker.
Next is Linda. I'll move her in.
Okay, Linda, if you could start with your name and address.
I am Linda Cardillo-Platzer, and I reside at 100 Hilltop Road. I'd like to make a comment today about the impact of natural gas on our environment and threat to our community of transporting natural gas through the proposed pipeline. Although natural gas has been touted as a clean energy source, in reality, it is a highly polluting fossil fuel that has negative impact on human health. While natural gas is a cleaner burning resource than coal and petroleum, it still emits a large amount of carbon into the atmosphere in the form of both CO2 and methane. A new efficient natural gas power plant, and I want to emphasize new and efficient, releases around 50% less carbon dioxide during combustion than a typical coal-based plant, but that figure doesn't take into account all the carbon emissions that happen across the full life cycle of natural gas, including transport and storage. The more dangerous emission is methane, a powerful greenhouse gas. Although it doesn't remain in the atmosphere as long as carbon dioxide, when methane first enters the air, it's around 120 times more powerful than CO2 at trapping heat and 86 times stronger over a 20-year period. Methane is leaked in large quantities during both extraction and transport of natural gas. Leaked methane cancels out any reduction in CO2 emissions brought about by replacing coal with natural gas. When natural gas leaks, it emits pollutants into the atmosphere that react to form ground-level ozone, also known as smog. And smog can cause a variety of respiratory and cardiovascular effects, and is especially dangerous to the elderly, young children, and people with asthma. For example, a recent study of men in the Boston area with an average age of 69 tested their cognitive ability daily, measured against air levels of fine particulate matter, small enough to enter the lungs and move into the bloodstream. The results of the study indicated a consistent association between higher air pollution levels and lower cognitive test scores. In addition, although we're not living near a fracking well, chemicals travel to Longmeadow from the fracking fields of Pennsylvania and Ohio, and leaks occur at every spot along the transmission route. Achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by the second half of the century is essential to the long-term health of our planet and our people. And relying on natural gas, although it's an improvement over coal and petroleum, is not even a short-term solution as a bridge to renewable sources of energy. Residential and utility scale renewable energy farms are already functioning and falling in price. Replacing coal with gas today instead of investing in renewables delays the widespread adoption of renewables that's essential if we're to achieve truly clean power. Thank you for letting me make this comment.
Okay. Thank you, Linda.
Okay, next is Tom Shea, and I'm moving him in as a panelist.
Okay, Mr. Shea, if you can start with your name and address.
Len, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry that I'm on multiple screens here. So,
Yeah, name and address, Tom.
Tom Shea, 81 Green Meadow Drive.
Thank you.
So first, on a positive note, the flags around the town green look outstanding. Whoever had the idea and who implemented this should be highly commended. Next, sewer-based billing. The issue was first brought up last November as separate meters. The town manager reported back in early February regarding a 2017 engineering study that recommended quarterly billing and winter averaging. 2 select board members went off and ran numbers for weeks, if not months. It's now the 3rd week of June, and not a lot of progress has been made. I commend the town manager for finding the needed Munis consultant, but that need should have been identified in March if a task force had been properly formed as originally envisioned. It now looks doubtful that the new sewerage billing process will be implemented this year, which from the original separate meter discussions of last November to the anticipated October billing period of this year is 11 months. Hopefully I'll be surprised. The overall process, governance, and lack of timely input by the town's professionals and its citizens has been absolutely terrible, and the select board should learn a lesson from this. Regarding quarterly billing, this was brought up in early 2021, the 2017 engineering study, and decades before. Amherst, East Longmeadow, and Wilbraham have it. Why not Longmeadow? Like I said, it was brought up numerous times since January of this year, and quarterly meter readings should have been implemented as of April 15th, July 15th, and then October 15th with the implementation of base billing. However, this process was delayed due to the citizen study that was done. I realize 2 people have left the DPW office and 1 handled water bills. However, the monthly reading, lack of data analysis and usage reviews, and bill production needs to be looked at very deeply. It is clearly a problem that every billing period, 400 to 500 work orders, 10% of the meters in town are generated, which takes untold work hours and 2 weeks to resolve. It has been a hot and arid year. I expect citizens will be incensed when they get their water bills in October that are, number 1, not quarterly, 2, have no base averagings for sewerage, and 3, will have the increased rates that you are voting tonight. This process has not been good. I will make sure citizens that have complaints send their comments to your emails listed on the town website. I commend you for getting this process done in terms of base sewerage rates. However, the implementation and the amount of time it's taken has not been good. Thank you for your time.
Okay. And Lynn, do we have any other
Don't
resident?
see anyone else with their hand raised.
Okay. So then we will move on to our boards and committee appointments. We have a couple individuals who should be with us. So the first, actually, this is the appointments. Well, did we have 2 people? Did we have someone who needs to be interviewed?
Yeah, there's 2 interviews before we go on to the appointments. I just moved John Bresnahan in now.
Okay. All right. Good. I must be looking in the wrong place here. Oh yeah. Here we go. Interviews. Great. So we have John Bresnahan for the Conservation Committee, looking for a reappointment to a 3-year term. John, would you just want to introduce yourself and tell us where you live and what your interest is in conservation?
Yes, good evening. My name is John Bresnahan, 47 Falmouth Road. I've been on the Conservation Commission in Long Meadow here now for over 20 years. Together with some of the other members of the commission, we worked hard over the last several years, many years, to enforce the Wetland Protection Act within the town and preserve some of our conservation areas. So I'd like to continue that work by a reappointment to the commission.
Okay, thank you. Now, there's been a lot of changes in terms of well, I guess the rules haven't changed that much, but does the amount of conservation land, was that increased with the Silvio Conti stepping in?
So the Silvio Conte took over the Fanny Stebbins, which is separate from Long Meadow Conservation Properties. So even though they're combined and intertwined down on the riverfront, they're not the same property. But it has not increased the town conservation area.
Okay, all right, great. Any questions from members of the board? Mark Gold.
John, one of the things we're reviewing tonight is a potential policy of review of cycling committee chairs. I was just wondering your thoughts on that.
I think maybe the Conservation Commission is a little bit different in terms of the expertise and the historical knowledge needed. Our chairman, Al Laxco, has extensive knowledge of both the wetland protection regulations, the town bylaws, and then the historical context in which those are implemented with the town. So for conservation, while we bring that subject up each year in terms of who would like to step in to be chair, I think we're all very comfortable right now with Al being the chairman for the foreseeable future.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, John, thank you for stepping up for reappointment, and we'll let you know in a couple of weeks in July. All right?
Thanks for the opportunity, guys. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks for joining us. And next we have Virginia Reedier, who's looking for Recycling Commission reappointment for a 3-year term. Do we have Virginia?
Yeah, she should be here.
Okay. Virginia, if you could start with your name and address. I see her here. Okay. All right, she needs to unmute herself and do her camera if she'd like.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Virginia. Thank you.
Sorry.
You just give us your name and address and your interest in this committee.
Yes, I'm Virginia Ryder, and I live at 20 Berkshire Lane, Long Meadow. And I've actually, I don't remember, I've been on the Recycling Commission, this is probably 8 years or so, 9 years, I think, because this gets reviewed every 3 years. And I've always been interested in recycling. And I feel like, while this last year was really not an easy year to do projects or anything else with everything closed up, I think that keeping abreast of the information and looking forward to the swap shop, I guess, finally opened. And I'm due in there in about another month. I think it's exciting. It'd be interesting to see what happens to the whole recycling center with the changes of where the DPW is located. And yeah, basically that's it. I've always been interested in recycling, and I've done it for years in any way I can.
Okay, thank you. And so do global effects influence our recycling? I know that there were some concerns about China not taking plastic. And is that something that's still going to affect us for a while?
I think it will. From what the information I've received through our chairperson and Erwin, he sends out postings all the time, and I read a lot about it. It does seem as if that was a major blow to us when China said they were going to close their borders to anything that we have. The interesting thing to me is if you take a look at a lot of a number, not a lot, but a number of the products that are being produced in the United States, it is with recycling, whether it's tennis shoes, I mean, there's tons, which from bottles, and even things of paper get recycled. And there's more, my point is there's more companies in the United States that are starting gradually to fill in that gap a little bit. And I hope it only increases as they do well financially, and that we continue to see that as a resource. I think it's always going to be a problem in our country and in the world. What do you do with all this stuff?
Yes,
I
plastics.
think an important thing, though, is really educating people on not buying so much. I mean, to pare down. I mean, here we've been cooped up forever. So the first thing people want to do, if they're not already doing it online, I mean, I don't know how many Amazon trucks, Prime trucks were in my neighborhood zipping around. But I think that we, as Americans, have to sort of change our interest in having all these things around us. And if we can do that, and then if you have them, the important thing is to try then to make sure they can get recycled in some way.
Okay, so would you at this point encourage people to buy things that are made out of natural fibers like, wood and things like that?
Most definitely. And I think the other thing is to make sure that, and I think Long Meadow's pretty well informed, most of them, but let them know about how we can get things recycled down at the transfer station, so that you're not just dumping it. And I know today I just took a printer to Staples because Staples takes them and recycles everything. So, I mean, I think information like that, I don't know how many people have it, probably more than I think. But if there are old computers, if there's anything technology, they can usually take it to Staples. Just call them. And I think it's a good resource that we do have. Otherwise, I think whatever goes down to, and I haven't been down there in a while, the transfer station, usually we can get that recycled also, I'm hoping.
Okay, well, your interest in the subject comes across clear
Good.
in our discussion. Any questions from other members of the board?
No, I think as long as they know that it's important and that we are all on our commission trying our best to sort of address education in the community related to recycling and develop any programs we can to help. Sorry, I don't have the COVID.
Okay. Well, we can't catch it anyways. Not through.
That's right. That's the good thing. Thank you very much for having me come.
All right. Well, thank you. We'll let you know in a couple of weeks.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye now. It was nice talking with you. Now, we look at the next, our appointments that we have been meeting people, and we have a memo for appointments, and so we have a large number. I don't know what's the,
Tom, if you want to, I'll go through them top to bottom if you want.
thank
I'd
you.
like, by committee, I'd like to move that we appoint Lawrence Rubin to the Board of Assessors for a 3-year term expiring June 30th, 2024.
So we have- okay, Steve. So we can take a vote on this one. So,
Since this requires a roll call,
yeah. So,
probably do is put some more of these together.
okay, Mike Barbieri.
Are we gonna put some more? Yep.
Tom, what I was suggesting is I'd make a broader motion so we have fewer roll call votes.
Okay,
So I'm going to move that we appoint Lawrence Rubin to a Board of Assessors for a 3-year term expiring June 30th. And we appoint Dr. Robert Bajewski to a 3-year term of the Board of Health expiring June 30th, 2024. And Christine Beaumont to a 1-year associate term on the Board of Health expiring June 30th, 2022. That we appoint Craig Carr to a 3-year term expiring June 30th, 2024 on the Building Demolition Committee. That we appoint Don Holland and Fred Rosenberg to 3-year terms expiring June 30th, 2024 on the Cable Advisory Committee. We appoint Kathy Mullins to a 1-year associate term expiring June 30th, 2022 on the Cable Advisory Committee. That we appoint Ira Smolowitz to a 3-year term expiring June 30th, 2024, the Capital Planning Committee. That we appoint Arlene Miller and Dave Marinelli to a 3-year term expiring June 30th, 2024 on a Community Preservation Committee. And that we appoint Francis Miffett, Sandra McFadden, and Marion Squire to 3-year terms on the Council on Aging expiring June 30th, 2024. We'll take those and then we'll do the rest as another group.
Okay, do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, any discussion on it? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mike Barbieri,
Mr. Lucusa,
yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Okay, so pick up with the Cultural Council.
Sure, I'll move that we appoint Robert Humberson, Andrea Schultz, and Thea Katsunis to 3-year terms expiring June 30th, 2024 to the Cultural Council. That we appoint David Miller and Marie Georgophilis to the 3-year term expiring June 30th, 2024 for the Energy and Sustainability Committee. That we appoint Tim Casey and Brett Luzick as to 3-year terms expiring June 30th, 2024, the Historic District Commission. And that we appoint David Miller, Brett Luzick, and Gerald Duquette to the 3-year terms expiring June 30th, 2024 to the Historical Commission. We appoint Andrew Berkey and David Horowitz to the 3-year terms expiring June 30th, 2024 at the Parks and Recreation Commission. We appoint Arlene Miller to a 3-year term expiring June 30th, 2022 of the Recycling Commission, and appoint Susan Shepard to a 1-year associate term expiring June 30th, 2022 to the Recycling Commission. We appoint Steve Steiner to the 3-year term for the Tree Committee expiring June 30th, 2024. And we appoint Ellen Fryman and Jerry Plum to 3-year terms, to 5-year terms expiring June 30th, 2026 to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and appoint Michael Michon to an associate term, 3-year associate term expiring June 30th, 2024 on the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Okay, Mark, and as I'm reading this, it looks like the Zoning Board of Appeals, we have 1 5-year term and 2 3-year terms. Do you read that?
Oh, you're right. I'll move we appoint Ellen Fryman to the 5-year term, Jerry Plum and Michael Michon to the 3-year associate terms.
Okay, thank you for pulling this list.
Thanks for the clarification.
Okay, do we have a second on the motion?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? By hearing none, Mike will do a roll call vote on approving these folks.
Mr. Lucusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Okay, every year we do an appointment for our town council and our labor council, and this is for the fiscal year 2022. And we would need a motion to name those councils. So we're looking at our current town council, Doherty, Wallace, Pillsbury, and
Yeah, I'm trying to find the motion.
Oh, okay.
I don't see the motion, but hold on a second. Okay, I'll move we appoint Doherty, Wallace, Pillsbury, Murphy, PC as our town council for fiscal year 2022, and Sullivan Hayes and Quinn LLC is our labor council for fiscal year 2022.
Okay, do we have a second on the motion?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. In
Yes.
terms of, well, I realize this is not, we're not building a building here, but in terms of, do we ever go out for competitive bids about this? I mean, this is year number one for me, but I have no idea how we actually pick these councils and whether, you know, Doherty and Wallace, et cetera, and Sullivan, et cetera, has been our attorneys for forever. And how this happens. Maybe, you know, since we do other things for competitive bid, maybe we want the best attorneys, don't get me wrong, but, you know, cost is not inconsequential. Just curious about how this happens.
Okay,
Steve, you're right. I mean, that was going to be my point. I think last year, because of the switch of COVID and everything else, we didn't get to it, but we did ask that we get competitive bids, and I think we ought to do that. We haven't done it now probably for 2 or probably 3 appointment cycles. So it's been 3 years. It's probably a good time to go out and get bids for the fiscal year 2023. But at this point, I think we need people for 2022.
okay. Any other comments from the board? Lynn, do you have any comments on this issue?
I don't. If you did ask for that last year, I'm did not have that written down and did not do that, but we could certainly do that next year.
Okay, all right. So then voting on the motion to accept these councils, it's been seconded. So any further discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Mike Barbieri.
Mr. Lucusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Okay. And we've come to select board comments, and there's a couple of things. And the first thing is,
we have to start the public hearing at 7:30. So we'll have to circle back. Yep.
oh yeah, all right, good. So we'll hold off on that, and let's go to the public hearing for the cable license ascertainment public hearing. So do I get a motion to join the public hearing? Begin the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote, Mike?
Mr. Lucusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold.
Yes.
Okay. So does someone want to explain the agreement and the current status of the agreement?
So Tom, I wasn't sure if you were going to read the script. It kind of goes over all of that, and then I can move the parties into the meeting that directly relate to this, and then we can ask everyone else to raise their hand if they had comment.
All right. Let me just, the script, I don't think I have it right on hand here. Let me see, it's maybe down here. Revised script. No, that's just the script. I do not have that script on hand.
I will send it to you right now. I'll re-forward it.
Okay. We'll pull that up. Because I know I looked at it earlier. Okay, those in the public, I appreciate your patience here.
Okay, I just sent it. I'll move the other parties in.
Refresh this, see if it makes a difference here. Okay. Thank you, Len. So that's where that's hidden. Nope. All right. So this is from attorneys Epstein August LLP from Cambridge, Mass. And it says, provided the suggested agenda and the comments that can be read by the chair.
So the second page is your script.
So the public hearing opening remarks. So good evening, my name is Tom Lacusa. I'll be chairing this evening's public ascertainment hearing on behalf of the Select Board, which is the statutory issuing authority for the town of Long Meadow. Tonight's hearing has been duly published in Long Meadow on, well, a public notice, I should say, longmeadow.org.
It was published in the Republican on June 1st and June 14th.
Okay. June 4th and June 5th. Okay. So tonight's hearing is mandated by the renewal provisions of the Federal Cable Act and applicable Massachusetts laws and regulations. The town cable television operator is Comcast of Massachusetts 2 Incorporated. The current cable license is held by Comcast and will expire on June 28, 2021. The town is currently involved in a federally required ascertainment process. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to identify the future cable-related community needs and interests, and 2, review the performance Comcast under its current cable television license. Once the town has gathered community input, it will inform Comcast of the services and facilities that the town expects that will be provided during the renewal term. Thus, the testimony that you will give this evening is very important, and I encourage all of you to speak candidly and specifically about any cable-related matters. Because this is a Zoom hearing, please indicate that you wish to provide testimony in order for your views to count and to be part of the official record. When you testify, please give your name and address. Because this is an ascertainment hearing for the town, I'll ask that you do not pose direct questions for Comcast to answer. All testimony and/or inquiries should be directed through me. Finally, I'd like to clarify that while this is an ascertainment hearing on cable television matters, there are 3 subjects over which the Select Board, as issuing authority, has no authority to regulate. First is the rates that Comcast charges for services. The second is the commercial programming that Comcast chooses to show on its cable system. And the third is Comcast's internet services. I realize these are 3 important issues. While people are certainly free to comment on these matters this evening, it is nonetheless important for everyone to realize that the Select Board cannot mandate the specific rates that Comcast can charge, nor can the Select Board mandate the specific commercial programming that Comcast carries on its cable system, and it cannot mandate provisions regarding Comcast internet services. With those introductory comments, I will first call on members of the public to testify. After that, I will call on the Cable Advisory Committee or any other town officials and department heads to provide testimony. So, Lynn, do we have any members of the public wishing to testify? Anyone who would like to testify?
I do not see anyone with their hand raised.
So then the next thing would be to look at so the Cable Advisory Committee members and town officials will testify second. Do we have anyone from the Cable Advisory Committee who wishes to speak?
I will speak on behalf of the Cable Advisory Committee. My name is Stephen Woolman. I live on Pinewood Drive here in Long Meadow. We began the process before Lynn Simmons was appointed town manager. At that time, Steve Crane was the town manager, and I requested that he send an email to every department and every committee determine what, if anything, they needed in the realm of cable television that Comcast could provide. I got two responses. One was from Ed Klein. I don't know what committee he headed at the time. He said they didn't need anything. The other was from Long Meadow Community Television, from Tracy Durant. She gave a form stating what they needed, and since that was the only entity that needed anything from Comcast, that is what we negotiated.
Okay, Mr. Woolman. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah.
So is there a representative of Verizon or Comcast
Comcast.
who is ready to make a statement?
Good evening. My name is Eileen Leahy. I'm the Comcast representative. I'm a senior manager for government relations for Western Mass, and Comcast is one of my territories. I'd just like to thank the select board and the town of Long Meadow for being one of our customers for so many years. We've enjoyed a long-standing relationship with the town, a very strong relationship. As Mr. Woolman said, we've been negotiating this for a period of time. We've had some good negotiations, and I would say we're at a really good point in our franchise renewal. So thank you.
Okay, and so as far as the actual franchise renewal, Ellen, are we going to have a definite decision in the near future?
Yes, we're just in the final stages of formalizing the language in the agreement. We've had a couple of drafts go back and forth, and I'm just finishing up formalizing our comments to get back to Mr. Attorney Epstein for final approval, and then we should be all set with it.
Okay, that's good. Any questions from the board at this point? Stephen Morantz.
Yes, just like our town attorney. Do we have any opportunity to put this out to competitive bid, which I assume we do not? I mean, basically it's, we ask Spectrum or somebody else to come on and say, let's talk about this, or is this Comcast has us, we need to negotiate the best deal we have, and do we have any choice in this matter besides Comcast?
Okay, that's a fair question. Who wants to take that? I see Steve Coleman.
I'll answer that question for you. It doesn't work. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. The law entitles Comcast to a franchise if they have substantially done what the franchise agreement said they're supposed to do. If another entity wants to overlay conduit, cable, they are entitled to come to the town and negotiate a franchise agreement. The agreement with Comcast is not exclusive, but the cost of overlaying Comcast, you're talking upwards of $20 million. And remember, we only have 5,400 households in Long Meadow. So if you start to do the math, how many are they going to get? What would be the turnaround time for them to show a profit? Nobody's jumping in.
Okay, and Stephen, does that mean that Comcast or a prior company that now Comcast owns did the preliminary work in terms of cable throughout the town?
Yes.
Okay, so Steve, I hope that answers your question.
Well, yeah, except basically our negotiating position is we have no negotiating position. I mean, basically whatever Comcast says, this is what we're going to do, folks. This is what they're going to do. I get that. I find that unfortunate. I get the fact that no one really wants to rewire Long Meadow for the amount of money that's going to cost us. But from a negotiating position, we're going to negotiate a new contract with Comcast. We might want to redefine those definitions. We're going to basically, Comcast is going to tell us what we're going to get, and that's what we're going to get.
If I might comment, the last time the Telecommunications Act was amended was in 1996. So we're talking 25 years ago. Technology has changed the law has not adapted to it. And unfortunately, if I had my way, I would break up Comcast into 4 entities, but nobody listens to me.
Well, hopefully they will in the future, Stephen. Thank you. Any other questions from the board members? Or comments? Okay.
This
Mr.
is
Gold.
Mark Gold. I have a couple of questions
Yes.
for Comcast. Dr. Woolman and I may be the only 2 people on this call who were here 10 years ago when we did this the last time. And we made some comments back then that I think are appropriate now because in fact, nothing's been done. And the question is, what is Comcast doing to continue to invest in Longmeadow, to renew the investment in Longmeadow? What we've gotten Comcast doing is going house to house and saying, if you're smart enough to ask for the Xfinity boxes, you can get that. But in terms of what the infrastructure in the town, we're still dealing with, I don't know, probably Media One's 1992 cables in many places. And, so this gets to my other point, which is reliability of the Comcast system, which at least in my neighborhood would be blunt, atrocious. I mean, atrocious. People here can't and don't have Comcast phones because you can't rely on it. Our cable goes out very, very, very frequently. And so I've been a purveyor of saying Comcast needs to earn our renewal for a 10-year contract and not just say, we made the investment many, many years ago. And I think it wasn't even Comcast. Like I said, it was probably Media One or AT&T back then. And we're just going to milk it now at whatever the median price is per house, which I think is now pushing close to $200 a month for cable services in the town of Longmeadow. And so, Mr. Morantz, I would tend to disagree. I think that we are negotiating from a point of strength, and that we can require Comcast to do things to maintain this contract. We do not have to renew it. That doesn't mean somebody else is going to come in here and buy it. As Dr. Woolman indicated, I don't think first of all, the only one who possibly could would be Spectra because they're adjacent to us in East Longmeadow, and you can't have non-adjacent communities being run. We're not going to get Time Warner or whoever the heck they are these days coming in here. But were we to not renew this, we would get Comcast's attention, especially if we said we need upgrades. We need cable upgrades in sections of town where the cables fail frequently or something fails frequently. And that's been my point. And so, Ms. Lee, my question would be, can you tell me the investment that Comcast has made, not on individual homes, but on the infrastructure over the last 10 years, and how we can see that Comcast will make that commitment over the next 10 years, so that 10 years from now, somebody in my place isn't sitting here saying it went from atrocious to ridiculously terrible.
So what I would say is Comcast is continually upgrading our infrastructure across our plant, across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We're always upgrading. I can't speak specifically to Longmeadow. I can say we're always upgrading. Our products are getting better, bigger, better, stronger, more reliable. I can say, if there's a particular area in town you want me to look at, by all means, let me know that. This is the first I'm hearing of this atrocious service. I'm more than happy to look into it for you and to see what the problem is.
But you shouldn't be the one. I mean, we call Comcast continuously. Isn't there this is a multi-billion-dollar corporation who ought to listen from their service contractors, from their service calls, from their customer service groups, knowing the number of outages that come. I mean, I hear you saying we're going to, we understand it, but the fact is that, Comcast service is no better than the wire that connects my house to the road and from the road back to wherever Comcast's headquarters are these days, which seems to be in Westfield nowadays. It used to be in North End of Springfield, and
we're still in Springfield. We have my offices in Springfield.
Okay, so but that's the weak link is the cable under the road, and nobody seems to be doing. And I understand that like I said, the boxes, the equipment, that are set tops, those seem to be going better. But, I would challenge if Comcast has put in, I don't know, over 1,000 feet of new cable in the town of Longmeadow in the last 10 years on main roads, and that's where I think we need to push back. And that's would be my request. And you know, I agree that we're not gonna get another cable supplier. I think the alternative cable everybody knows are things like streaming systems and satellite systems and that kind of thing. But the cable also serves our internet, and it's the weak link.
I have one other comment on this one, and Eileen, this has nothing to do with you, but this goes to Mark's point in that you don't know what Comcast has done for Long Meadow. You should know. If it's nothing, then it's nothing. If it's something, it's something. But if you're here at our hearing and you don't know what Comcast has done for Long Meadow, that's not good. That doesn't say good things about Comcast and Long Meadow. And so, as I said, that's not you, but that's the company you work for. They should have someone who knows actually what's going on in Long Meadow, if there is.
I can certainly find out what the upgrades have been. I mean, that's not an issue. Steve, I talk to Steve all the time when he ever has issues or questions. I'm always there to answer them and provide the information he needs. And if I don't have the answer, I'll find the answer. So I can certainly find that answer for you. I just, it's just off the top of my head, I know we're constantly making upgrades to our system, and we're always checking the nodes and making sure our nodes are all working. And that's when the main communication part of the system, those are checked frequently and often. There's a regular schedule for that. And we're constantly investing money into the plant, across the Commonwealth. So I just don't have a specific number for you, and I apologize for that.
But when you come to our hearing, you ought to have a printout from the customer service group of saying, here's the 87 calls or 870 calls that we've gotten from Long Meadow in the last 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, so that we know that, if there's a trend. But we don't know that. And so the issue is, we don't know who's calling Comcast. I know when I call them. I know when my neighbors claim they call, but I don't know what that data is. And I don't know if Dr. Woolman in the cable committee gets that, but they ought to. Instead, we get 3 letters a month telling us you're changing channels, which is great. But what we ought to get is upgrades, comments about the customer service and the customer service level, and the issues that we get that from our police department. We ought to get it from Comcast.
Okay, so we look at a couple of things. And one would be that if members of the town have issues with the provider, Comcast, then they should probably be letting the Cable Advisory Committee know that this is coming up. Of course, they would need to call Comcast, but it would be an added benefit to us if the Cable Advisory Committee was aware, especially if we're going to be negotiating a contract. All right, and Ellen, I don't know if this is a typical kind of hearing that you attend. I mean, do you tend to get these kinds of questions, or yeah?
No. Normally, I'll be honest, normally we don't, it's a public hearing, so we're more in a listening capacity.
Okay.
Just to be honest with you, but so I apologize, I don't have that data with me, but it's just not.
Okay. And then is the hearing, would you'd like to make just a closing statement before we continue? Ellen, anything else?
So I can, I will say Comcast, we're very proud of our service and the service we provide to our customers and to our communities. And we're with government relations, we're the link between the towns and Comcast. So if there are any issues, my job is to work to resolve those issues, and I'm very proud of our rate of resolving issues and being responsive to the needs of the communities. And when there's information needed, I'm always more than happy to provide it and answer those questions and put anybody's concerns at rest. Comcast we're very proud of what we do and how we do it. In what we've done in Long Meadow over the years, we've been a strong community partner in Long Meadow and Western Mass, and we're proud of that. So I just thank you for the opportunity to continue to serve the customers in Long Meadow.
Okay, thank you. So the next would be the concluding remarks. If there's no further testimony, that concludes tonight's public hearing. If you have questions about tonight's hearing or the cable television renewal, please call the Select Board office at 565-4110. Thank you for attending tonight's public ascertaining hearing. And I would look for a motion to close the hearing.
Don't move.
Second.
And we have a second? Okay. Um, Okay, so we'll take a roll call vote. Mike,
Mr. Lucusa,
yes.
Mr. Strange,
We're voting it to close the hearing?
Close the hearing, yeah?
Yes.
Mr. Moretz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold.
Yes.
Okay, so our hearing is closed and, I guess we will be having another meeting on this to make the final agreement and sign that for the next 10-year process. All right, the next thing I'd like to move to is select board comments. Unfortunately, we didn't put much in the agenda we have two members of this board. This is their last meeting. And so we have some gifts for both of them. And I guess I will start with Richard Foster, who has been on the board for 9 years. And he was a chair twice. He was a big proponent of getting the new building for the DPW, a strong person for making sure that our sidewalks and our roads were improved. And we have a plaque, and I believe Mike Barbieri, you have the plaque for Richard Foster? Okay, he's holding it up. This is going to be tricky because you're going to have to make noise in order for me to read that, but I think you probably should just read it, Mike.
All right. The plaque to Richard says, "The town of Long Meadow gratefully recognizes Richard Foster for serving on the select board from 2012 through 2021, and thank you for many years of exceptional service to the town and its residents."
Okay. And I know this is sort of unusual, but is there anyone else on the board want to say something at this point? Because you will be able to make a comment later during select board. Okay. And the next one is Paul Pasturzik, who has spent a lot of time looking at the assets and the liabilities of the town, and he's never been a liability. He has saved the town tons of money by renegotiating loans that we've taken out and, saving the town millions of dollars, like $2.5 million. He seems to make it look like it's nothing. We've been so lucky to have him. And then he always finds the best interest rates for all of our standing money that we want to get interest on. We do have a gift for him that the select board members have chipped in on. And Mike has this also, and that is a clock with the town seal on it. And could you read that statement?
Yes, this is for Paul Pasturzik, and it states, "You have been a valuable asset to the town of Long Meadow for 35 years. Thank you for your service to the town, and congratulations on your retirement from the 2021 Long Meadow Select Board."
All right, Paul.
Thank you very much. It's very nice. Thank you.
All right, good. I'm hoping I can get a look at it tomorrow morning before you take it home. But great work. I don't know those are my comments. If other board members want to make comments, I see Mark Gold.
Thanks. I have 3 comments. The first one is I want to reiterate the comments from Tom about Paul Pasturzik. He and I have had some interesting interactions over the last 12 years or so, and his precision has been just amazing, and that's what you want for in a town CFO. I think we kid around and we always say, "Paul, do you balance your checkbook to the penny every month?" And I know with Paul the answer is yes. So that's the sign of a good CFO. I also really do need to give a shout out and thanks to Richard Foster. He's really been the voice of capital improvements ever since he was on the capital planning committee and came to the town. I think the nature of our streets and sidewalks owes a good deal of gratitude to Richard's insistence that we spend money on capital upgrades. It would not have been done because it wasn't done before he started that. The other 2 comments I want to make are the following. One is the last meeting we voted for a contract extension for Lynn Simmons, that doesn't just happen. There's actually a contract extension document that's now on, I think, on Mike's desk in the town hall. And the four of us and probably Richard Foster between now and tomorrow need to go in there and sign that. So we put pen to paper on what we've already voted to extend that contract. So I encourage everybody to get in there and sign that. The document was prepared by Gordon Quinn, who's our labor lawyer, and I, been told about that. So I want to remind everybody that we need to do that. The second thing is the ongoing saga of the Hampden County Regional Retirement Board. Some activities that have been going on recently with the town of Hampden. It turns out that the town of Hampden also uses the same legal town council, which is Doherty, Walls, and Pillsbury, as the town of Longmeadow. And they've been working with them to see if there's any potential legal recourse for recovery of the money that was ill spent. It's not insignificant. It's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Either it's through directors and officers insurance or through some other means that they've identified. And I think the town of Longmeadow ought to be willing to help defray some of those legal costs. Hopefully we can do it they're looking to do it kind of like I don't know if it's a class action suit or something like that, where, whatever money is recovered pays the legal fees and then gets distributed to the communities. But there's a substantial amount of money that's potentially recoverable. And I know folks at Hampden have been working at that. And I think we ought to be part of that. So I don't know how we move forward with that, but I just wanted to put that out also. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mark. Thanks for your comments. Any other comments, select board comments? Steve Morantz.
Yes, two comments. First, I would like to comment on the comment about the natural gas that was made by earlier citizens' comments. I believe, and I think we should all take this very seriously, is those comments were directed at some part to what Eversource and Tennessee Gas want to build in this town. So the detrimental health effects of natural gas, fracked natural gas and methane, are directly relevant to the citizens of this town. And on a nicer note and a happier note, Paul Pastorzik and I go back a long way. When I used to be chair of the finance committee in this town in the early 2000s, Paul was still here. He was a little younger, and it was just as sharp then as he is now. And it's really nice to have come back to see him in a new capacity. And I'm very sad that he's leaving. I think he's done a phenomenal job for the town, and I wish him the best.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? All right. So now we go to the town manager's report. Lynn Simmons.
Thank you. So a COVID-19 update related to town offices and remote meetings. So as you know, town offices reopened on June 1st. Some slight modifications have been made to the town clerk and the treasurer collector's offices to allow them some more space. The select board town manager office has temporarily relocated to the meeting room at town hall while we identify a more permanent office space. The town clerk has moved into that former select board town manager's office space, and the treasurer collector's in the same space, but now just properly spaced out. We are also working to build a first floor meeting room that's on the ground level that could be accessed by the assessor's office and the building department, so that members of the public won't need to go upstairs if they don't have ability to, or if they need a private meeting space. That room is in progress right now. The new finance director is now located on the 3rd floor of town hall, and it's not certain yet whether that will be the permanent office or just a temporary spot for the time being. And remote and in-person meetings. So last week, the legislature did pass a bill, and Governor Baker signed that on Wednesday morning last week. So we do allow, we will be allowed fully remote board and committee meetings now until April 1st of 2022 while they work on permanent changes to the open meeting law. Flags on the town green have been installed. They were put up last week on the ornamental light poles. I do agree with the resident that made comment. I think they're a wonderful addition to the green, so definitely take a look at them next time you're out. The Converse Street sewer improvements that we mentioned during announcement, this work is going to be done by GEG Construction, and it starts on the 28th. We will have a full detour map on the town website if you'd like to look at it. The skateboard park feasibility study. So this was funded at the June 2020 annual town meeting. It was done through a CPA funding request for $15,000 to do a skateboard park feasibility study. Pillar Design Studios LLC was selected as the contractor for phase 1 feasibility and schematic design, and phase 2 design services would be done separately if the project was approved and funded. The design consultant will meet with Alex Grant, the CPA applicant, the skateboard park working group, and Long Meadow Parks and Rec director to coordinate the completion of a feasibility study and to facilitate a public forum to discuss skate park plans, concepts, potential locations, with opportunity for community input. Once the objectives of the feasibility study have been determined, the consultant will prepare a schematic design with estimated public construction costs. And the DPW organizational study kicked off on June 9th. The consultant from the Collins Center for Public Management was on site for the first meeting and toured the facility. Interviews are being set up for DPW staff, key boards and committees, and other town officials for later in July. The report is expected to be completed by the end of this calendar year. That's all I have tonight, Tom.
All right, thank you, Lynn. And any questions on the town manager's report? Okay, Lynn, now the organizational study, will that look at all different phases of the organization, like including safety management or safety protocols, or is it more with?
It may touch on that. It's not a full safety study, but it may make some notation of it.
Okay.
It's mainly about the structure of the department and staffing levels,
Okay.
and how staff is utilized across divisions.
Okay. And then with the flags, who were those purchased by the towns? Who, I don't know where this idea hatched from.
Sure. So it was really a joint effort. So after I joined the town, it was brought up to me in a meeting with the Veterans Service Officer Lena and some members of the Veterans Council, and we had just a general discussion about how great that would look. So I inquired with the Historic District Commission on what it would take to get flags erected along the green there. They informed me that it would need a certificate of appropriateness. So I passed that information on to Lena and the Veterans Council. They worked on the application. I wrote a letter of support. They worked with facilities from the DPW to install them once the application was approved. So it really was a joint effort by lots of parties involved.
Okay. And will they be up like from spring to fall and then removed in the winter?
Yes, so hopefully they'll stay up now until after Veterans Day and then come down for the winter and then go back up in the spring to be up before Memorial Day next year.
Okay, that sounds great. Any other questions from the board? Mark Gold.
Yeah, Lynn, it's more of a comment. I read Chief Dearborn's report about the issues about reporting and not reporting, but the emergency 911 center procedures. And I think there's been some confusion in town. I've certainly heard it from a couple of residents that and so it may be worth clarifying. What Chief Dearborn's comments made pretty clear is that when you call 911, the first thing they do is dispatch help. And then they give you the 20 questions grilling. And a lot of people have said to me, all they did is ask me questions when I just needed a fire department or an ambulance. And I think this concept that they get dispatched immediately, but they have to go through the questions may not come across the people as well as it might. And I don't know how we bring that back to whether it's Aaron at the 911 center or others, but I've heard that from a couple of people that felt that the emergency service was delayed in getting dispatched because of all the questions they were asking them. And Chief Dearborn's memo made it very clear that that wasn't the case.
Okay, good. Any other questions from the board? Seeing none, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is we're going to old business. We need an approval of the June 7th meeting minutes.
Hey, Tom, these came out at 4:30 today. They're pretty lengthy. I know I didn't get a chance to read them. I don't know if anybody else did either. Is there a chance we can just defer these till the next meeting? And I mean, if the three of you have read them and approve them, that's fine. But I'd be surprised if anybody's really had the chance to go through them based on when they got distributed. And that's not a knock on anybody, just the fact that we ought to be able to read them.
Yeah, I mean, the minutes have been really good for years, but I think we should do that. Would other people feel comfortable with that? Just putting them on, move them on to the next meeting?
I have no problem with that.
Okay, all right. So then, and Mark seems okay. All right, so let's do that. Thank you. The next item is board and committee chairs, a term limit policy. We have a draft that was put together by Marco. This was brought up by Richard Foster to look at, the contributions we make through their participation, but some board chair positions have been locked up for long periods of time. So I hope people got a chance to read the policy, and does anyone have any questions on the policy? Or Mark, did you have any other comments about what you've written here?
Yeah, I've just two comments. One is that I put together a draft and then Lynn fixed it up, so it has gone through the town offices. The second thing is that it was interesting. I made a question. I asked a question today of the applicant for the cable of the Conservation Commission, and his comment was pretty much what I expected. And if you look at the draft, it does acknowledge, or this draft policy, it does acknowledge that certain committees require a specialization that isn't available throughout the committee, and does make allowances for that. And I thought I'd point that out. But other than that, I think it pretty much speaks for itself.
Could you just show me the point where it says a chair might not be replaced after 2 years?
Sure. In the third paragraph, it says this committee chair term limit policy shall not apply to boards and committees that require specific qualifications such as education, training, or state licensure for which no other committee members hold the required certifications. This exemption is intended to address requirements of the Conservation Commission, the Board of Assessors, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. Where other committee members meet qualifications, these boards should endeavor to rotate chairs as well. So that's that third paragraph, Tom.
Okay. But in a situation where a person was a chair and there wasn't any special specific qualification, could the board, overrule this?
No.
No. Okay.
No. It said, it doesn't mean they have to leave the committee. It just means that you have to rotate chairs.
Rotate chair. Okay. All right. So what other board members think of this proposal? I see Steve Moretz.
I do not agree with this proposal at all. I think that if a committee wants to get rid of a chair, they can do that. They have the ability to vote. I have been on 2 other committees for long periods of time, and one in this town and one in another town, and I believe that when a chair of a committee talks to another chair of a committee, that's important. And when they keep rotating, the whole continuity of, well, we had the discussion last year, but now we're 2 new people having a new discussion about what those people might have been discussing last year. I think it's unnecessary because any board, elected, appointed, has the ability to remove chairs when they want to. And so I think this is an unnecessary imposition on boards, and I think it actually, at some level, given the nature of long-term relationships. Let's discuss what's going on. I think it's unnecessary, and I'm not in favor of this particular suggestion.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'll chime in here, Tom. Mark, thanks for putting that together. Appreciate your work as always. I'm with Steve on this one. I think that it's hard enough to figure things out, in a couple of years, particularly if you're the chair. We're talking about volunteers who aren't Robert's Rules experts. Probably don't have time to do the trainings that the state offers to properly chair meetings. And I think continuity, as Steve said, is great for the chemistry of a committee. Some committee members just may not have the time or want to be the chair. So I think they probably find some solace and relief in being on a committee with a chairperson who knows what they're doing and does a nice job. And also, as Steve said, if somebody else wants to be the chair, they can certainly have a vote on that. And I think, again, going back to my prior comment, the reason that people stay chairs for so long is that they're doing a good job and they've earned the trust of their committee members. So I'd be voting against this.
Okay. Well, I'd like to hear from more people in the community about this before. We won't vote on this tonight. We'll discuss it and have it for a future meeting. But, sometimes I wonder if people are just too polite to be able to say, you've been chair for 15 years, I think it's time for someone else to take over. And this kind of policy would make it easier for people who weren't up to standing up to a chair who's been there forever. And when we look at leadership development, it's important that people get those experiences at some point in these other committees, because those are the folks who are going to become perhaps running for the select board or school board or seeking out other leadership experiences. So I think it's definitely worth talking more about. And Mark, I appreciate your work, and I think we should put on the agenda for a future meeting if people are okay with that. That sounds like what we would generally do. Any other comments?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know that we really need to debate this tonight. Clearly, when you look at board development, whether it's committees or boards, anything you look at, any professional organizations looking at board development, endorse, cycling through board chairs. I think this idea of expertise, of continuity, doesn't mean you're losing the person. It doesn't mean you're losing their input. But I think, Tom, you got it right. There's an inertia that makes it very difficult to move somebody off the committee chair, and that ends up driving the committee potentially in a uniform way that doesn't give the opportunity for new voices. And that's really what this was about for new voices. It specifically didn't say people need to leave the chair or leave the committee. That doesn't say they can no longer participate. In fact, it specifically says there's no term limit, if you will, on being on a committee. But I think it's a good idea. I think we find ourselves on our committees in our town where there's more people who are reluctant to make changes when we ought to than the other way around. So let's see what happens when we go through this a little bit and get some input from some of the committees.
Yes. I encourage committees to let people on the select board know what your experiences are and why you think it would be a bad idea or a good idea. All right, good discussion. Thank you. The next thing is the report from the Cable Advisory Committee, which was very, it talked about the expansion of townwide internet systems And they talked about what's happened in Westfield and Agawam, Greenfield, Holyoke, and then some other sort of options. So I guess we could start with do we have Steve Woolman here still? All right, so would you want to talk to us a little bit about this this report?
Well, prior to talking about that, I just wanted to comment about Mark's comment about his cable going out, the internet going out. I also heard right after that comment, I got a phone call from Norm Michaels, who is also on the Cable Advisory Committee, who lives on your street and has the same problem. So therefore, what we do know is it's not directly from the pole at your house or the pole at his house. I would write, if I were you or the board, write a letter to Dan Glanville, bypass Eileen Leahy, and tell him what's going on and demand a maintenance schedule, demand to know why this isn't being fixed, and if they don't fix it, write a letter to the FCC, light a fire under it. But that's just my opinion. That's what I would do if I were in your shoes. As far as the municipal fiber review, over the weekend, I also prepared about 40 some odd questions that I would want a consultant to get answered in researching this. I will tell you that as far as a total Wi-Fi system, I got a lot of information from the fellow who runs Whip City. And he was telling me that the town of Royalston has contracted with Blink Networks of Canada, Ontario, Canada, but they went on the cheap because they didn't have much money. And they are doing a 25 megabit per second download system, which I think, my personal opinion is it's foolish, because at the end of the year, Starlink is going to be going active, and Elon Musk is saying that they're going to have their system with 300 megabits per second download. And with them, the equipment is $499. The shipping cost is $50. The monthly fee is $99, and the town pays nothing. So why invest in a system that's going to be obsolete in a year? Which brings me to another issue. If you're going to invest the money to do some sort of a town-wide system, the most important thing is that it's scalable. What is a large number for download speed today is not going to be suitable in 10 years. And if you're going to be spending, you know, $10 million, $20 million, it better be good for 40 years, which means you're talking about fiber. I don't know, and one of the questions that's going to have to be answered from Blink is how upgradable is their equipment? If it provides 600 megabits per second download now, is there a software upgrade to allow it to provide 1 gigabit? Or is it you're going to have to replace the equipment? If you're going to have to replace the equipment, you're constantly reinventing the wheel. What is happening is they used to talk about the Internet of Things as something in the future. Well, that's the present. Everything now is on the Internet. Your garage door could be on the Internet, your security system, your refrigerator. My cousins moved into an over 55 community, and the microwave talks to the oven, and that talks to the refrigerator. And it's all on the Internet all at the same time, and it's constantly taking bandwidth. If you have a family of 4 and everybody is downloading a different 4K movie at the same time, it begins to suck up that bandwidth. And 4K is the present, 8K is not that far along, because they're already selling 8K televisions, which means somebody wants to watch 8K something, they want to stream it. So that's coming too. So if you look at what I sent to you, and I told you what Whip City is doing and what GSET is doing, GSET is doing something where they run the fiber and then they broadcast wirelessly to the home. Whip City is fiber right to the house. They're doing top of the line because that fiber can last 40 years. And they can upgrade it simply with, they told me that if somebody needed a 3, 4, 5 gigabits per second download, now they can provide it today, which means it's not going to be obsolete in 10 years. And if you're going to spend, up to $20 million, you don't want it to be obsolete in 10 years. So don't do it on the cheap. Is basically what I'm saying to you. If you're going to do it right.
Okay. All right. And so, we have these different options and we look at, what different cities are doing. And so did you have, are they all going to be just different? Or is there one that would stand out as a preferred approach?
The preferred approach is Whip City's approach, fiber to the house. The only questions that you have, and it was an interesting question I asked West Springfield. I asked them, do you have the right as an ML&P to use the conduit of Eversource? Because you do have the right to be on the pole. And the woman said their contract with Eversource allows them to do that. So we would have to look at our contract with Eversource for rights of way to determine whether or not we have that. And if just simply being an ML&P, whether that automatically gives you the right to use their conduit the way it gives you the right to use their pole. Another interesting thing that came to mind, and I was working on my list of questions for a consultant yesterday, is can you run fiber on the streetlights that the town owns rather than on the poles? Because if you're running it on the streetlights, does that mean that you don't have to pay the pole fee every year, that you don't have to pay for replacing poles with taller poles, and that you don't have to pay for moving the cables? If the answer is yes, you can, that would save a lot of money on doing a fiber system. And that's a question that only the lawyers and the consultants can find out about, because I know nothing about it.
Okay. And the other thing is the bottom line would be if we move forward with some sort of a different approach than we have now, what kind of money would residents save? And then would this generate any income for the town?
The purpose, I don't think, is to generate income for the town. It's to make the system an ongoing system, because you're going to need maintenance contracts. You're going to need replacement of parts from time to time. Remember, if you're on a pole and somebody's in a car accident and hits the pole and the pole comes down, that's not part of your maintenance agreement. That you got to replace on your own. You want to make sure there's parts availability. You want to make sure that the people who are doing the maintenance have trucks on the road so that they can be available. I personally, I would rather you do it the right way. People will probably save, if they're really big spenders and they want to cut the cord, they're going to save $100 a month. The people who are going to use this service, the town service, there are two groups. You have people who are internet centric, those who are going to cut the cord and maybe be on the cable for the local channels and pay $14.95 for that, and the rest of it be on the internet. And you have the people who are the avid gamers, who need a lot of bandwidth and a lot of data, and they're going to hit that 1.2 terabytes in the middle of the month. And even that, Comcast says, it's 1.2 terabytes, nobody's going to hit it. Nobody's going to hit it today. We don't know what they're going to hit in 5 years, because when everything is going more and more on the internet, you're going to use more and more data, and you're going to hit it. And that's why they're trying to sell you a bill of goods that it's a lot, and that it's only the abusers who are going to hit it. Not so. Only today that's true, but later on it's not going to be that.
Okay. Do we have members of the board? Yes, Mark Gold.
And Dr. Woolman, thanks for all the work you did on this thing. When I thought of this, what I was looking for was something 20 years down the road. And the question is, is fiber optics so 21st century or so 20th century? When in fact, if you look at where Verizon's putting their money or AT&T's putting their money, they're putting their money into wireless 5Gs and whatever comes after that, which is ultra high speed, high volume, all wireless stuff. So you don't have to pay the cost of high speed or, putting fiber or, into each house. But instead, you can take advantage of the lights we own now and put them on some lights, certainly schools that we have around town or municipal buildings. And so the question is, is there an opportunity that's not what I'll say, capital intensive, not fiber optics intensive, going to every house, that 5 years, 8 years, 10 years from now is going to be every bit as competitive as fiber to the house, and we're just going to set it up on the roof of the municipal buildings and both save money for the residents, make it more widespread.
Well, right now, Verizon is using what's called millimeter wave for its 5G. The problem with millimeter wave is it doesn't penetrate very far. You don't know if the signal is really going to penetrate into your house. I know T-Mobile has what's called home internet, and I tested it. I had it installed in my house. I used it for 1 day, and I was getting a stronger signal from Comcast than I was getting from T-Mobile, and I sent it back. So at least where I live, that Wi-Fi is not feasible. It doesn't work. Not today. Verizon is not selling it here in our town yet. Again, you will have no control over it. You could call Otelco and ask them to come in or sit down with them. That's what Agawam wanted to do, and only to find out that Otelco was doing it on their own anyway, and there's not going to be any contract, and you're not going to own it, and you're not going to have a say in the matter. And yeah, you can choose to wait and see what comes down the pipe. Me personally, I think this town missed the boat 25 years ago when we didn't own the cable system and we franchised it out. Going back over 100 years ago, we missed the boat when we didn't form our own light and power and gas company the way Holyoke and Chicopee and Westfield and South Hadley did, and then farm it out so that we would have some control. The only thing left that you can control is owning your own fiber. You own your own destiny. It's capital intensive. You have to bond for it. You don't have to do it all at once. You can do it over a few year period, doing section by section. You will have to build out your own head end in order to do it. If you go with a company like Link, they require very tall towers that are higher than the tree belt. So that are higher than the tree line, so that the signal beams down to their nodes on the poles. And you're going to have the same problem whether it's a Verizon system or the things on the pole, because all you need is a few leaves in the way and you block the signal. I know I have the roof antenna and I get a lot of the channels from Connecticut, but every so often you lose the signal for a second or two because some branch waved in front of the signal. And you have the same thing now. Digitally, it's not the same as analog, where you got a little static or a little confetti. You lose the signal entirely. And so from my perspective, yes, you could have somebody look at Blink and find out what they can do, because it's an all wireless system. But I would also, in the back of my mind, I don't think it's going to work here because we have too many trees. And you may have to put up additional lights. You have to find out whether you can add additional street lights to the poles that already exist that don't have street lights, because you may find that you need them in order to blast out a signal. And the more download speed you have, the more of these tall poles, transmitting towers you're going to need. Another question would be, can you do it by running a fiber directly to one of these transmitters on the pole and then daisy chain it to see if that would work? And if so, at what download speeds are you going to get? That's why I was advocating getting a consultant, spending some money to find out exactly what it would cost either to do a fiber system or to sit down with Blink, interview them, find out what they can do, find them to analyze the town to see what they can deliver to all the residents, and then you can make a decision as to what you want to do.
Okay, and Steve, a question. So we have this tower that has gone up by the tennis courts in the center of town, pretty much by the shops. And would that be, would that do it, or do you think Blink would need more than one of those?
Oh, Blink would need quite a few more. One tower doesn't cut it.
Okay.
You need fewer towers for a lower system. But where we are now, where we have, you can get gigabit system if you want to pay for it from Comcast. In a town like Royalston, they don't have that. For them, this is better than nothing. You're going to need multiple very tall towers in order to get a Wi-Fi system. It's the thought that what we were told a few years ago about nodes and microwaving to Westfield, that's all fantasy. According to Westfield, that never happened. That conversation never took place.
Any other questions from board members? So I guess there, one thing that, we thought was appealing at one point was that if it became like a utility and the town, was giving residents a quality service at a lower price, and the town was able to maintain this, perhaps, make some money, small amount. Not that we would be gouging residents, but then it almost sounds like you're saying that this would be more of a, like an amenity, that the town would be providing something like this, but wouldn't really making any money.
Well,
it would increase people's interest in the town.
The whole purpose is not to make money. The purpose is to compete with Comcast so that you can get a better service or the same service at a much lower price. You can possibly make money, but when you organize an ML&P and you build a head end, you've got to build in the cost of maintenance, the cost of repairs, the cost of upgrades, software upgrades, and don't look for it as a way to make money, because that's not the purpose.
Okay, so it would be like an amenity, like we have tennis courts where people.
No.
Like there, we have swimming pools. The town has swimming pools, but people don't have to. It's something that helps the community, and so although they would pay for this, it would still be. We'd be competing with other towns in a way, because they'd look and say, well, if we lived in Long Meadow, we could get this much better service compared to other towns. Is that what?
Well, I see what you're saying, and yes, it's something that makes Long Meadow special. So somebody comes in here, we have our own internet system. Yes, from that perspective, it does make you special. But initially, if you get 10% of the households that sign on, that's going to be a lot. And remember, we only have 5,400 households to begin with. So you're talking, let's say, 500. But of the 5,400, people who are very old, and I don't include myself, and I'm 76, I don't include myself, they don't even have internet. They don't have email, they don't have internet, and so they're not affected by it. The people who are affected by it are those who are younger, who have kids in school, who are using the internet much more exclusively than cable. They don't have landline telephones. Everything is a cell phone. So yeah, if you're talking about it as an amenity to make us different and make us better, yes, indeed, it would do that. But I'm thinking more in a practical sense, that if somebody's going to save $100 a month, that's $1,200 a year. And if you figure how much you have to earn, pay the taxes, pay Social Security, pay Medicare, you're talking $1,500 a year. It's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Good. Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay. I guess I'd just be open at this point, declaring that I do have a little bit of a bias, because I think that having a system where people would spend more time gaming. I mean, I think gaming is fun, but I just think, teenagers, we barely see them as it is.
Yeah, well,
We might just lose them. They might just.
you have to look at the people who work from home and the people who watch movies, who stream movies. Gaming is a minor thing. It's everyday life that's going to be all on the internet, and you're going to find that you're going to be using more and more. When we have this discussion about how much download speed do you need, it reminds me of in the early 80s when my brother said to me, why would anybody buy a computer with a 486 chip? There's nothing that runs on it. Now, if you had a computer with a 486 chip, it wouldn't work because nothing runs on it. Everything needs more and more power, and that's what you're going to have coming down the pipe year after year after year. And you're going to find that 100 megabits per second download is too low. Remember, when I started with on Comcast Internet, I was getting 25 megabits per second. Now they say up to 100, but I've never seen 100. It's going to be more and more on a yearly basis because you're going to need it. And if you're going to need it, you need a system that's going to supply it. And when you need more and more, you need a system that can give you more and more. And so that if you go wirelessly, you have to make sure they can do it without having to replace the equipment. If you go fiber, you don't have to replace the equipment. You have to change the software.
All right. Thank you for the report. Any other comments or questions before we close the section? All right. Thank you, Dr. Woolman. And we'll process this and get back to it. All right.
Nope. Thank you.
Yep. So we also have old business, the activity and use of limitation authorization having to do with the new DPW. And we need to pretty much take a formal vote on this site that talks about the limitations. And is this something our clerk needs to read or myself?
Yes, it is.
So the clerk, and do you have that document up?
Yep, I'm going to share my screen right now.
Oh, okay.
All right, can everyone see that?
Yep.
All right, so this was presented by Town Engineer Tim Keene at the May 17th meeting. And it was for your review at that meeting, and it was going to be posted on a later agenda for vote to finalize. So after we finalize the AUL, after you vote to finalize it, we'll just have to coordinate a time for the clerk, Mr. Morantz, to come in and sign the form, which I believe there are other items on the agenda in which we have to coordinate signatures as well this week. And then I got an email from Wesson and Sampson and Tim earlier that Wesson and Sampson will coordinate the signature page with everyone else too, and myself after this meeting.
Okay. So is that type, can you just breathe the type up just a little bit more for folks watching at home on their TV? It might, just enlarge.
I can't sign this tomorrow when I sign Linda.
No, you can, correct.
Okay. So
Tom, you want me to read this?
yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and read it. Yeah.
Okay. I hereby certify that I, Stephen M. Morantz, am the duly appointed clerk of the Long Meadow Select Board, and that Thomas Cusa is the duly elected chair of the Long Meadow Select Board, that at a meeting of the Long Meadow Select Board held on Monday, June 21st, at which meeting the following vote was unanimously passed. Voted that Thomas Cusa be and is hereby authorized in his capacity as chair of the Long Meadow Select Board to enter into and sign on behalf of the town of Long Meadow notice of activity and use limitation. I further certify that said vote has never been rescinded and that it's still in force in effect, and that the charter and bylaws of said town of Long Meadow authorize and permit said vote.
All right. So
Tom, I'm going to make a motion that Tom Cusa be and is hereby authorized in his capacity as chair of the Long Meadow Select Board to enter into and sign on behalf of the town of Long Meadow this notice of activity and use limitation for the DPW site.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? You know, I know this is something we've talked about before, and it has to do with the contamination on the site, and that's what these limitations are for. So if there's no other questions, we'll do a roll call vote. Mike?
Mr. Lucusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Thank you. And that went pretty smoothly. And now we'll look at the public health. We go to a seasonal liquor license renewal for the Clubhouse Cafe LLC. We still need to vote on this, Mike?
Yeah, so where we left off in March was the board approved the license through June 30th, contingent upon them paying their outstanding stormwater bills. Those bills have since been paid, so the board would need to vote to renew their seasonal liquor license through June 15th of 2022.
Okay. Any additional information on that? Lynn, did you beat the bushes? How did this happen?
To be honest, I don't know. We inquired with legal. They made some inquiries, and we hadn't heard anything more about it until Mike checked up on it the other day and found out they paid.
Well, I will gladly forward a motion that we renew the seasonal liquor license for Clubhouse Cafe LLC. Anyone care to second that motion?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll do a vote.
I just like to make a comment for the comment period. The process worked.
Yeah.
The comment.
Yeah, it was great. We did well as a board. We did the right thing, and that's why we work together so well. This is proof. So we'll move on to a vote. Mike, will do a roll call.
So Lucusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
All right. Now, new business, we talk about the Public Health Excellence Grant, letter of intent for shared services. And so we have this document. And Lynn, do you want to just explain this a little bit?
Sure, and I also have Eric Weiss from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission here tonight.
Okay.
Eric was helping us through the DLTA project first, and now is helping us with this shared health, public health excellence grant. So I actually think I'll turn it over to Eric. I don't actually need the select board to vote on a letter of intent because we are the lead applicant. We do not need to file one, but we can certainly give you an update on where the other communities are. So I'll ask Eric to pop in and tell you that.
Certainly. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Thanks for
I'm happy to be here. I've met most of you, so if not all of you. I am manager of regional municipal services at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. Just briefly, one of the projects that we started working on under the DLTA project, the District Local Technical Assistance Funding, was a shared health arrangement with Long Meadow and 3 other towns, those being Munson, Hamden, and Wilbraham. That has morphed into a DPH grant because Lynn and I worked together to submit a DPH regional shared services grant worth up to $300,000 a year for the next 3 years. As it turns out, Long Meadow, as you know, became the lead on that grant application. A number of contracts and forms have passed between the town and the state, and some will pass between PVPC and the town. That is all about creating a shared service between the 4 towns, with Long Meadow, thank you very much, acting as the lead community. So a number of efforts are in process, sort of parallel and simultaneously. The first one that Lynn mentioned was that we thought there might be a need for the town of Long Meadow to sign a letter of intent to participate in the grant. But as you're the lead community and you've already signed off on your state grant documents, there's no need for that. And I had a conversation with Ron O'Connor at DPH today about that to confirm that for the town. The second thing that we've been working on, and we had a long meeting today in which we discussed a lot of details of it, and I'll go to whatever level you want me to in terms of detail, Lynn, was an intermunicipal agreement, an IMA or an MOU, whatever you want to call it, between the towns to define how the shared arrangement will work going forward. The towns have the power to create regional or shared arrangements, and they can be defined through a joint powers agreement, which is what this is. And the towns can put in almost any, not any terms, but any terms they think are appropriate within this. So we actually started with the document, which was the IMA for the East Longmeadow relationship, which made it to about the 10-yard line, but there was no score after that. And that was the basis for this document, but we've changed it now since in a number of ways. So what we're trying to do is create what we're calling the Eastern Hampden Shared Public Health Services. And I will just give a brief detail of why that name was chosen. It's shared. It's not a regional district. It's not an authority. It's not a commission. It is shared, meaning that all of the ways in which the communities share with each other are defined by the communities. It could be that not all communities share exactly the same services under that umbrella. Some may take advantage of more. Some may use a few less. That will be entirely up to the communities that are involved. So at this point, before I go any deeper into that, I want to know how deep you want me to go into the IMA. But I will close by saying that the intent is that the IMA would cover all areas of interest between the towns and is being scrutinized by the towns at this moment. And that we're doing things like examining potential long-term budgets, what happens when the grant monies run out. Right now, it's worth approximately $287,500 a year to the town to benefit the towns, which supports basically 3 shared positions that are not in the town, any of the town's budgets or health budgets. So, like I said, in closing, what I'll say is that we have an agreement in place. There was talk today of making it a 10-year agreement between the towns so that it could be revisited. Not only is it revisited every year for what it does for the towns, but it would also be really revisited in terms of its longevity and how long it will remain in place. But I am happy to go into much greater detail depending on the board's interest tonight.
Okay, thank you, Eric. The one question I have is, so it says this program will augment rather than replace current municipal funding for the public health staff or services. So you said that there'd be 3 additional staff, but our actual budget for services is not going to decrease at all. Is that right?
Well, that's only half true, to be honest, Tom. And the reason is that as we implement the pieces of this grant that are in place in terms of hiring the new shared people, it will become clear over the next 2 or 3 years while that grant money is being used, which services are redundant and which ones aren't, and how you could share other portions of the services and make it work.
Okay.
So it may very well be that the town may commit some of its existing Board of Health money to the shared arrangement without it being considered additional monies. It'll be to supplement or be replaced. But that's the challenge that we have going forward. The challenges that the towns have going forward is to really examine how that piece will work. Right now, we're in the really fortunate position of having a significant amount of money to be put towards this by the state because they want to see, from a public health point of view, especially in light of COVID, more cooperation between communities, more communication between communities, and more shared services between communities, because that was also determined as part of COVID, like it or not, where one of the breakdowns in communication was in terms of the local level. So again, it's to Longmeadow's credit that they've stepped up as the lead, that you've stepped up as the lead. I don't think this grant application would have made it through DPH without that. Lynn has been crystal clear with us that there's going to be no extra carrying costs like OPEB and all the other pieces all the other ancillary costs, that all of that has to be really well defined as they move forward. It is really nice to have a 3-year runway to figure this out. And that really the towns can have a 3-year runway, figure this out, put into place the IMA, and really have something that is shaped the way they want it to be shaped.
Okay, thank you. Mark Gold has a question.
Yeah, you know, as they say, the devil's always in the details on this kind of stuff, Eric and Lynn. And I think the issue for me is where the details are. I think, you know, we're entering into this for a couple of potential reasons. One is obviously get better services, to get more efficient services, which make part of better, or to save money. You know, you can always say better, faster, cheaper. I'm not sure we need faster services, but the question is, how are we going to define success? How are we going to define, you know, is that part of this IMA is the definition of what success is, so we can look back and say we achieved what it is we thought we were targeting for?
Well, first of all, that's an excellent question. And second of all, the way the IMA is laid out is it's very much staged in terms of the involvement of the communities. In the way that for example, the way it develops the budget is based on the fact that the grant monies will be used first, over the first year, second year, and third year, to help delineate how a budget could be or would be developed for the shared arrangement as well. The other answer that I have for that is that's why specifically that word shared was used, because that will allow for the goals to be determined in terms of what are the best arrangements to share in terms of public health and what are not. Now, that isn't really a specific answer to your question, but I think the last part is that it's all in the opportunity of how the towns define what they want to do, including Long Meadow as the lead.
Yeah.
And I don't think Long Meadow should involve itself in anything that it considers unfair in terms of the ratios of balancing costs versus salaries versus long-term investment in it. So I think it's a totally unique opportunity that exists in Eastern Hampton County. We have a group of towns that really want to work together, that want to try to make something work in the public health area, and we're doing it in the post-COVID or almost post-COVID environment, in which it's pretty clear to everybody that there needs to be cooperation to make things work.
Yeah, I guess just to follow up quickly, Lynn, you know, we know that there, even just between us and East Longmeadow, for example, East Longmeadow's health department runs their trash collection. I mean, are we looking at saying maybe that's the best model and Longmeadow ought to do that? Or are we saying maybe our model's the best and we're going to target for East Longmeadow not to do that? Or we're saying we're not going to play around with that. They can continue to do it. We can continue not to do it. Let's just move forward. Is that the kind of thing that's going to be part of it?
Right, yes, to some extent, yes. Some of it will be like a la carte. So the 3 other communities we're working with right now all share a health inspector, but they don't share that person all as one position. They each contract with that person individually. So they know going into this that is one of the areas they need the most. They also, to some degree, each need a public health nurse. Only one of those communities, actually 2 of those communities, have a very limited public health nurse. And what those communities have that we don't is more admin support. So all of us bring something slightly different to the table, but if we were all going out to try to capture that on our own, we'd be competing against each other, and none of us need it to the full extent on our own. So I think a lot of this is going to be building as we go to some extent, but I think we'll have a much clearer picture in about 8 months when we've got some key positions hired, and our health director right now is working pretty quickly with the health inspector in those communities to capture what the full world of health inspection is there, so we really can understand what their needs are just moving into this.
Okay, Lynn, thank you. And thanks, Eric.
Tom, can I just follow up with one more question? And that is, when do you foresee us moving from this grant down to the level of an IMA?
Great question. So right now, the letters of intent are what are first needing to be filed. So Hampden has already signed theirs. Munson is scheduled to vote on it July 13th, and Wilbraham is scheduled next week. Then we would move into the IMA process. The group of town administrators and town managers have been meeting by every other week right now to hash out the different drafts. I think we're on draft 7 right now, if I'm right, Eric.
Yeah, draft 3 will be ready tomorrow.
Great. And so we do anticipate moving ahead with an IMA in the next few weeks. And that will come to you.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
And see, now this is Paul Pastorczyk's last meeting. Paul, Paul, have you gotten to look this over, or are you just heading out the door these days? I don't know if you got to look over this contract. Does it make sense?
So Paul was heavily involved in the East Long Meadow discussion, and he reviewed that multiple times. I have not engaged him directly in this process.
Okay, that's only fair. Okay, we'll be hearing from him soon because we have another member on the agenda. So as far as this letter of commitment, do we need to make a motion to sign this?
No,
Table.
because we are the lead community, we do not need to sign one of those. I didn't have clarification from DPH before the agenda deadline, so I did include it in case we needed to. But now you can also see a copy of what all the other communities will be voting on.
Okay, well, we appreciate the information and thank you for inviting Eric Weiss to be here with us tonight. Thank you, Eric.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
The next thing is we look at 471, 475 Long Meadow Street improvement. Colvest had asked us prior to allow them to change the parking area there so they could get some renters. And so there is a question about LED parking lights. And Lynn, what's the?
Yes. Yep. So I just moved the applicant and
Okay.
see it's in. But just to give you some background, this came up due to a resident raising a concern about light poles that were seen on the site. In follow-up with the applicant, I discussed what was happening there and learned that they did in fact want to put up 4 parking lot lights. These are not your traditional parking lot lights that we see in other parking lots, even the CVS across the street. This would be a solar LED parking lot light, about 40 kilowatts. And so I will definitely turn it over to the applicant so they can provide you some better information or clarify anything that I may have not stated correctly.
Yes.
If I may.
Yeah, well, please do.
I'm Jeffrey Roberts, and I'm here with Frank Colacino and Peter LaPointe from Colvest. You may recall that in September of last year, Colvest signed an agreement with your board to build out the improvements on the property, and it has essentially been completed, except that the tenant there remarked that in the months of shorter daylight, it gets dark when you go out to your car in the parking lot, and they asked if there could be some lighting there. So the plan that was approved in September was very detailed, but it didn't show any lights that would light the parking area. So in response to that request, Colvest thought that, well, sure, we'll put in some lights. And then it became apparent that there were no lights on the plan. So when the question was raised, I guess to Lynn or someone, and said, well, what's going on with the lights? We realized we have to come in and have your board approve the lights, which is, I suppose, technically an amendment to the plan that's already been approved and built out. So Peter LaPointe is the engineer here, and he can explain about the lights, but Lynn, I don't know if Lynn got these papers in your package, but we sent over a description of the lighting system. We sent over the survey plan with 4 lights or 5 lights indicated on the plan. And then today, Peter sent Lynn a luminaire schedule showing the dispensation of the light on the surface of the parking area. What is in fact the lighting in front of the CVS or in front of the Berkshire Bank are a gigantic spotlight that lights up the entire parking lot and the entire building and just floods the neighborhood with light. And Mr. Colacino just didn't like the idea of that, even though you could call Eversource and they'll come in and they'll put up a gigantic pole and put a light on it and then charge in this case, it would be Colvest rent. But Colvest would rather have some much more tasteful lights, which are only 20 feet high, LED lights down. The light goes directly down to the road. They're solar powered. They're really much more attractive than the alternative. So Peter Laporte, I've exhausted my technical skills in explaining these lights, but Peter would be happy to fill in the blanks. But we'd really like to, I think if it was thought of at the beginning, it would be hard for me to imagine that we would have said, well, we want you to put in a project, but we don't want any lights in the parking lot. So I hope that you'll agree with us that this is a good resolution to that issue.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Mark Gold.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. I have a few questions. You know, I do agree that this is a modification, and I think I'm just making my comment is it speaks to the need that we should have had a site design review by the planning board, and this probably would have been included and it's been missed. So my first question though is, we've got a specification here. There's Soul by Suna Design lighting. It shows 4 or 5 different optional lights, but it doesn't say which one we're picking or you would be selecting. And I wanted to know which one you would be selecting.
If I may, these are downlight LEDs. I think on the package you have, the head is shown on probably the 5th page in. It's a 40-watt fixture. They shine down onto the pavement, and they're powered by the solar panel that's right above them. They're each individual light fixtures. They're not wired together, but they are programmable, so we can have them go on at dusk and have them go off a half hour after the last tenant leaves the building for the evening. They sit on a concrete base, and they're on the island. I guess the only thing I'd add to Lynn's comments is there's actually 5 of them. We also are installing one at the entrance off Belle Claire, which is the entrance to the whole parking area and the gas station. So we've got 1 at Belle Claire at that entrance, 2 at the exit to the gas station. That's a one-way exit out onto Long Meadow, and 2 at the exit from the parking area out onto Bliss Street.
So if I could, Tom, first of all, few of us who are of a certain age who recall the discussion at town meeting and a planning board about the gas station when it was originally Scott's and they were going to renovate it. And I don't know if Attorney Roberts remembers this because I know he lived in town then. There's a massive discussion about the lighting there and a lot of objection by town residents. And in fact, you can go back and look at the records that the lighting of the islands was absolutely restricted. And so I think that at the time we made restrictions to those lights that would probably not allow that. What was just described as an entrance by the gas station. That's in the history of what the town has done. But more importantly, and the reason I asked about these, because I know a little bit about lighting now that we've done our lights, okay? There's a light specification called BUG, and Lynn will remember this because we went through it. It's backlight, uplight, glare. It's a BUG rating. And we went through some pretty extensive studies and specifications with the state who required that all of our lights be a BUG rating of 1. Okay, these lights are all 2s and 3s, which means there's far more uplighting, glare, and backlighting than would be specified through the standards that we've adopted through the town. You know, the difference between, and I can forward these to you, I'm not going to bore you with it now, but it's not linear. A bug 2 is about 10 times the dispersion uploading of a bug 1. A bug 3 is probably, 30 or 40% more than a bug 2. But these are bug 2s and 3s, and which is why I requested which one you were using. Either one of those is more than the bug 1 that we specified. Again, if you'd gone before our planning board, that specification would have been in there, would have saved everybody a lot of effort. At this point, A, there's neighbors objecting. B, the specifications of changes at quote unquote the gas station entrance already violate a prior vote by the town. And C, these lights don't meet our standards. I'd suggest that we ask these folks to go back and meet our standards and then go before our planning board with a site and design review, which should have been done to begin with, to make sure that their design meets our town standards. And I'm not against having lights. We need lights, but we just need the right lights and not lights that are convenient.
Could I comment about part of that? I do remember the garage very well, the gas station very well. But we did go to the planning board.
Can you hold on, please?
Yeah,
I just want to see if there's any other comments from the select board
sure.
based on Mr. Gold's comments. And if none, we can move to you.
Tom?
Yes.
Yes, several comments where the light at the corner of Long Meadow and Belle Claire, there is already a street light so having one down there makes no sense to me. Having two at the corner of Bliss Street also makes no sense because there's also another street light there. I get the fact that you might want some lighting in the parking lot where you head out and there's the one-way thing where you can't go in. Maybe that makes some sense. But putting streetlights where we already have streetlights, I mean, granted, I guess we're not paying for them as a town, still makes no sense. And given what Mark Gold said about the actual lighting itself, as far as those intersections go with Bliss Street and the exit there and Belle Claire and the exit there, no lighting is needed there. They already have streetlights there, so I see no reason for that. And I think that even with this, I'm not sure, but I think that this stuff needs to go to the planning board anyway. The planning board hasn't heard this, so I'm with Mark. I think this proposal in terms of what may be needed and what they're proposing are not the same kettle of fish.
Okay, any other comments from the board? Okay, Mr. Roberts, please.
I just wanted to say that this project did go to the planning board before that contract came to your board. And the planning board conclusion was that even though they appreciated the visit, since there's no building permit required, then site and design review is not triggered by the planning board. So, I mean, you can certainly ask other departments for their opinions on the lighting, but it isn't a formal site and design review project. That's the way it came out.
Okay, thank you. Mark Gold, yeah.
That's different from what I heard from our planning board chair, but I think that's a better reason for it to go to the planning board. I've heard not that they didn't hear it, not that they didn't see it, but that they think that at this point this is a planning board issue. So again, we can do what we want to do, whether it was legally required or not. I'm not accusing anybody of doing that. I'm just saying that the lights don't meet standards, and we should have a full review of the site design.
Okay, so we have and again, lights, usually when they go up on Long Meadow Street, I mean, they're permanent fixtures. They're going to be there forever. And so I think it is important that the board is on the same page, feeling that these are appropriate lights. I appreciate the steps taken, to make sure that these are going to be just 20 feet high. I think Converse is showing a good effort, but there's just a few details that I think would be better to work out. Because I don't think you're going to get the kind of support you need for this on this at this point. So we hate to trouble you.
All right.
Yeah.
I guess taking it from, I can't walk out there. We can't walk out there at 5 o'clock at night right now and see what it looks like. But is the expectation that there's enough light there that it really isn't dark, so you don't have to worry about lighting, putting any lights on that street? I mean, it is a street.
Right. Well, I think it's people need to, if we had a clearer chart of exactly where the existing lights are, where the proposed lights are going to go. And I know when I looked at your diagram, I had a hard time determining that. I don't know if other people on the board felt that way. Steve Morantz?
Well, I think, as I said, I think where, when we approved this, well, when the board approved this, this was an expansion of a parking lot. This was not a street. No one ever defined this as a street that needed street lights. This was an expansion of a parking lot to allow parking for this particular set of shops. And where you have two lights that are on the parking lot, that makes sense. Having them off on Long Meadow Street and Belclaire do not. But I don't ever recall us approving the street. And so I object to that description of what this is about. This is a parking lot for these shops, which is fine. And there should be lighting in the parking lot. But for on Bliss Street and Belclaire, they have plenty of lighting right there. That's not the issue. The issue is, yeah, I walk out of one of these shops, which hopefully will be occupied one of these days. I want lighting, and that's what we're talking about, not lights on each side of the street. But we didn't make a street. This was an expansion of a parking lot.
Okay. Any other comments on the way lights are generally proposed for, entries and exits to parking areas? I mean, is there something you can tell us that would say, you've done your research to say that these are the specific locations that would be preferable for some specific reason?
Well, go ahead, Peter.
I think that when we looked at the photometric plan, the disbursement of light from those locations lit the parking area and lit the travel aisles. The parking area and the travel aisles within the parking area do not benefit from the lights on Long Meadow Street. That's why the tenant was complaining, and that's why we weren't showing those vacant spaces after 5 o'clock in the winter or early spring. It's dark. It's not inviting. And just from a safety standpoint, you'd like to have the area lit where you've got people getting in and out of their cars. So that was our objective. And those
one could argue that ground level lighting in the wall, that's kind of sideways lighting would have done the trick. I mean, for me, it's a pedestrian safety. You don't want to walk out of a store and trip on the curb. You don't want to trip in the parking lot. That's what you want to have lit. But we went through craziness with the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission over this bug specification for streetlights. And they bought into the fact that the state standard is a bug one. If you're gonna, I'll be glad to share with you how they got it. We bought them from Gray Bar was the low bidder. I'll be glad to share them with you. But the fact is, you don't need that. You don't need overhead lighting. You just need to light the ground. That's why I think you got to take another look at the design of all this stuff. But clearly, if the state's telling us the standard is a bug one, why are we going to sit here and approve bug 2 or bug 3 that now adds to the light pollution that the state's trying to avoid?
Where do I find that state standard?
I'll put you in touch with the folks at the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission.
Sure.
You know, I'm glad to, I mean, Peter, I'm not trying to, you know, I'm just saying, you know, we paid an upcharge because of that requirement. So if the town did that when we bought our, you know, 1,400 streetlights, the least we can do is make sure we maintain it for 3 or 4 or 5 parking lot lights, if we even do that. And I'm not convinced you need overhead lighting. That's my personal opinion. I'm not a lighting designer.
Right, and I think that's, you know, we have to make it clear that, you know, the select board is not the experts on lighting, and, you know, what statutes are. We have our views and we want to share them. We want to do the best job we can for the town. And it sounds like you're also on the same track. You know, perhaps lighting for parking areas is different when it's you know, it's not a street, but if it's a parking area.
Mhm.
And so, you know, if you could just make it clearer for us about why you've done your due diligence to say that this is the best locations. This is going to spread, you know, cover the area. It's going to be safest for people using the building. It's not going to create additional complaints, and I'm hoping that we can get these approved.
Yeah, let me just say that this is Frank Colicino. The standards are different. I don't know what a bug one is, but what we have done is we've asked our lighting people to go in and do a lighting plan, and basically what it does is they've engineered where the light hits on what part of the parking area. If you take a look at that plan, which I think Peter has sent over to Lynn, none of the lights spill over into any residential area. The light by the entrance to Belle Claire really is lighting that sidewalk. The 2 lights that Peter spoke about near Bliss there's a tree there that blocks one of those lights. And so the sidewalk, the public sidewalk there, this lights that up a little bit. We have a sidewalk where a lot of people use that going from Belle Claire to Bliss, where we have 2 other lights that shine that parking area as well as the sidewalk. I mean, we've done a lighting plan. We've done we've been very, very careful to make sure that the light doesn't spill over into any residential so that it would disturb anybody. And those are good looking lights. And I thought that with the solar powered, which are extra, I mean, they're not inexpensive, and regular lights that you would connect electricity to are substantially less money than this. So we thought that we were being a little green on the energy portion of it, and we asked our lighting engineers to make sure that the lights didn't spill over off the parking lot, which they have assured us, and they did a plan that shows that they do not. So anyways, I thought we really went a little bit over and above to try to make this a nice look. And I hope now that we've sort of finished the wall and the parking area and the landscaping, we put sod in most of the areas so that where we had sprinklers. So we really made a lot of effort in making this look like a nice place landscaping wise. So I think the lights would just make it safer. And if you remember, I think we are responsible for insurance on that area. In the event somebody falls, we've taken on that responsibility. So this is it becomes a safety issue as well. So just wanted all of you to have the benefit of that information.
Thank you, Mr. Colicino. I think that's.
I have to respond to that. Mr. Colicino, thank you. I appreciate your comments, and I understand and respect everything you said, but I refer you to page 7 of the specifications for the lights. That page 7 shows that it does spill over. The definition of bug is backlight, uplight glare, and it defines how much there is. So I understand your lighting engineers told you what it does and does not do, but the fact is they didn't tell you the whole truth. And, you know, we're here sitting with, you know, contractors and developers talking to select board members about a technical issue that neither one of us has the knowledge to really speak intelligently of. I only have enough information because I spent a year and a half of the town's time working on streetlights, but frankly, I don't believe that I'm intelligent enough and knowledgeable enough to do this. I think this needs to go to a group of people, and that's why we charge our planning board to do, is to be intelligent enough to do this. Bring in your lighting engineers and let them document that what they're showing us is in fact different from what's in that specification. As you can tell, I spent a lot of time looking at this thing. I'm reading from my right now, and it says, you know, type 2 long distribution. It's bug rating BGUOG3. That's a bug 3. It doesn't meet the specs. Okay, so I hear you, I understand you, and I empathize with you, but you're the wrong guy, and frankly, I'm the wrong guy. So let's put it in the hands of the right people and take care of this, because I don't believe we've got what we need.
Okay, so is that a proposal that you would be willing to accept, to take this to our zoning, what's the zoning board of appeals? Or
it's the planning board.
Planning board? So would you guys think that would be, you'd be able to take it to a planning board meeting and just get them on board with this?
And you're looking for a recommendation back from the planning board?
Sounds like that's what the board's thinking, a couple of members, yeah.
Jeff Roberts, technically, is that, where do we stand on that, Jeff?
Well, I think, I really don't think it's site and design review, but the select board can make a decision on their own. And I think it sounds to me like what Mr. Gold is saying is that he wants to have a recommendation from somebody else. So it's really just, that plan was worked out in a lot of detail with DPW and streets people and all the, the town agencies. They contributed a lot to that plan. I don't think the planning board really contributed much of anything because I have it right in my notes that it was said that if, site and design review isn't triggered under the bylaw unless there's a building permit, and there's no building permit on town land. So, you can ask the planning board, we can ask the planning board what the planning board thinks about it, but it's up to the board, really. It's up to the board. I don't think the planning board would refuse to look into it.
Why don't we go to the town engineer? Would that make more sense? I mean, if we're talking about having people who have knowledge, maybe that would be a better course.
I mean, Mark, when you're talking about streetlights and the bug numeral 1, is that something that the town itself has more experience with? Because the planning board doesn't deal with streetlights or any of that. They just deal with the lighting around shopping centers.
Frankly, Jeff, the only one who had experience with it was the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, who told us, here's what you need and here's what you're going to get. I didn't know enough to ask about that.
Oh, you mean on streetlights?
Yeah, it was on streetlights. Yeah. They said, here's what you need for streetlights. That expertise didn't exist and still doesn't exist in the town. I mean, I'm not trying to pretend we're the experts. We don't know. All I'm saying is that when I got somebody telling me, here's what you need and here's what you got to do, and then somebody comes in and says, I'm not following those specs, I'm pretty much concerned about it.
I don't think those specs are in any code for shopping centers or anywhere else. I mean, I'm not arguing about it, but I've never heard of them before.
And they may not be, Jeff. All I'm saying is that's what we've adopted. Like I said, we were, I won't say it was dictated to us, but was told this is the ones we were going to buy. And it's not like we had a tough time getting them. They're all over the place. My suspicion is if you went back and said, I need a bug one light because there's this crazy guy on the select board who insists on it, they could probably find it for you. The issue is, again, going back to other people's comments, where do we really need a placement at each entrance? And, you're spending the capital. Do we need 5 or can we get away with 2 or 3? Is there a different design? That's what I think the planning board brings to it. They're not going to know whether it's, which light fixtures are the best ones. They're going to look at it in the overall context and also get some resident input.
Yeah, well, the issue is if you're going to illuminate the parking area, then I think I guess depending on you can get a fixture like they have in front of where the CVS is on Long Meadow Street, and if you look at it, the pole's like 35 feet high, and the light is like something you'd see at Fenway Park. So it's just a question of how minimal can you be and still provide the light. I think that's what we're all looking for.
Right, and it's like anything else. As we put in new lights around town, we want them to be the newest, the best, and appropriate for uplight and backscatter and whatever it is. And I think if CVS was to come to us now and say, I want a light, they wouldn't get the one they have that's been in there for the last 15 years or 10 years or however long it's been in there. So again, I think that's why we depend on some of these other folks to give input. I'm certainly not the right guy to design this.
Right.
Well, is there at least a consensus that we're better off having some light in that parking area and sidewalk than no light?
Well, there's a consensus, but I would make the case that on Belclair and on Bliss Street, there's lighting. In that parking lot where the street goes out and you have to go right onto Long Meadow Street, which would also illuminate the parking lot, assuming we get bug ones in there, that makes sense to me. On either side of the parking area where you all have streetlights and I will grant you that the sidewalk where you come out of the gas station and wherever, and someone leaving this area might run over somebody, so you want some light there. But on either side, it makes no sense. That in terms of design does not make sense to me. Having something in the parking area, and as Mr. Rowland said, maybe low lights as opposed to above lights would also make sense. Also, in terms of, you can talk about CVS a lot, but until there's a CVS-like tenant in that area, which is going to be getting people to 10 o'clock at night, I think you're putting the cart ahead of the horse here. Right now we want to have parking lot lighting, but at this stage of the game, I think what you're proposing is overkill, particularly in the Belclair and Bliss.
So I would like to close the discussion on this. It's obvious that we're not going to get an approval this evening. I think we're best to put this on a future agenda when we're going to have a full board, 5 members, and perhaps you can do some research on this bug system and see if that can work. I know you've already put a lot of time into this, but I don't think we're going to get a decision, and it doesn't make sense to continue to go back and forth on this. I thank you for coming, and I will put it on the next agenda in our July meeting. All right? Unfortunately, we're not going to move forward, I don't think. But
All right. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Good evening. Okay, the next we look at is a letter on water and sewer and the water sewer rate setting. And we have a couple of different things. First, we have a DEP letter that's from the Department of Environmental Protection. And so they have sent this as a public water supplier, and they're concerned, and they have a paragraph in here that we need to take pretty seriously, and Lynn is not sure how many times this paragraph has shown up in the past, but I'd like to put it on the screen here. Well, I would need to be able to share my screen.
You want to share it?
Yeah. Okay. So let's see if it,
I should have just given you permission, Tom. You should be able to, unless Mike can do it quicker.
looks like this. That's it. You guys can see it.
Yep.
Okay. So this is a paragraph here. And it says they have conservation goals, per capita use of 65 gallons per person per day. And Long Meadow per capita report gallons per person a day for the last 3 years has been 120 gallons per person per day. And then another year it was 92 gallons per person, and then 94 gallons per person per year in 2018. So the largest number was 2020. The excessive per capita use in Long Meadow is likely the result of a number of residential long irrigation systems. This comes from the state. Mass DEP requires that by September 1st, 2021, Long Meadow submit a proposal to reduce its per capita water use. That proposal should include consideration for more frequent billing, implementing ascending rates based on water use, establishing a bylaw, ordinance, or other enforceable document related to lawn irrigation, which requires that residents' lawn irrigation systems be equipped with rain sensors or similar equipment, and other water conservation measures. So, and they, care should be taken to verify reported numbers on all subsequent reports on this. So, we look at a per capita use of 65 gallons, and last year they had us at 120, basically almost double per person per capita. So what are we going to do? We can run away from it, or we can start to put together a proposal to reduce this per capita water use. Now, Lynn's impression is that at some point the town could be fined if we don't meet expectations. And Lynn, I imagine you still feel that way.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure about the fining because we don't have a permit for a water distribution that we buy our water from Springfield. So I'm not entirely sure on that. But some measures we can take and we already are taking. One is the quarterly billing. I do anticipate that will be forthcoming in the next few months. I don't have an exact date, but I should by the next meeting. The other is certainly research on a bylaw for water conservation efforts or the irrigation sensors. We can certainly, do some research on that and get something together for the fall town meeting. We can definitely do some public education campaigns about water conservation efforts. But the tiered water rate system is something that warrants further discussion and rests here with the select board. I do have Jeff McAlmond, the DPW director, here tonight as well, if you had any more specific questions from him. Just to give you some context, though, I did pull the statewide residential gallons per capita day report for 2020 that lists all the communities in Massachusetts public water supplies. And there are 5 communities over 100 for 2020. The top one was Weston at 139, and the second one is Long Meadow at 120. And then there's 3 more below us, and then the rest are in below the hundreds. So we are substantially high in the state, and I'm happy to share this document with you via email.
Okay, so those of you, Weston is a pretty affluent suburb of Boston, where the Celtics and the Patriots, those folks are living there. So obviously they want green lawns. They don't care. We are in the same boat as them. We're probably a larger footprint than they are, but I don't know. I think as I talked this over with Lynn, I I said the first thing would really be to do a public campaign and put a plan like that together. Most people aren't aware that, certain things like taking a bath instead of a shower, you actually use less water. Um, Looking at laundry, how many gallons of water are used in each time wash is done. Um, we may have more low volume washers in our town than maybe some other towns. But I don't know what folks, how you react to this. Any comments? Okay.
Yeah, Tom. So, it seems like to me this kind of compels us to revisit the discussion we're having about, the water rates in town. And DEP is very clear that they'd like to see something. In fact, I think it's the language is more more severe than that. That they need to see something by September 1st. Considering we don't have town meeting before September 1st, we can't do a bylaw before then. But I think we need to act on this.
Okay, thanks. And Steve Morantz, you look like you were.
Yes, well, two things. I'm not quite sure how we do the irrigation systems, but there's nothing more, there are several things more aggravating, but an aggravating thing is walking around town in the rain and watching someone watering the lawn as it's raining. So it's something that could be done. And I believe, as that report says, I mean, at some point, a tiered system for water it makes the most sense. Once you're above sewage and you're done doing what you're doing, if I get it, it's not going to the sewer system, but if you're going to water your lawn every day, that should actually be costly to you. And that's one of the things that it seems like they're recommending, but it appears that we're way over what the rest of the state is doing, and whatever we can do to bring it down would be a really good thing.
Okay, thanks, Mark Gold.
Yeah, this becomes a two-edged sword because, as our water use goes down, our water rate goes up. So it's not a matter of residents saving money. In fact, my guess would be there's going to be little money saved in the long haul. If everybody cut their water use in half, the rates would probably go up 80%, if not double. So the issue is if we're compelled to cut our per capita water use, do we do it through incentives like, Long Meadow has a lot of old houses that probably don't have low flow toilets. Do we incentivize that? Long Meadow, certainly water sprinklers and incentivize people for putting in wells by the town contracting, like we did with the solar system, Steve. We go out and get a real good price for people to put in individual wells. I mean, in my house, I think the water level's 12 feet down, so it's not like it's a $5,000 well that would go into my house, if I needed it. So I think we can look at things like that and public education, but people shouldn't expect that I'm going to cut my water use and save money, because they're not. The money basically runs the system, and the less we use, the more cost per unit.
Mm-hmm. So when I talked with Lynn about this, I came up with the same conclusion, that if we could find some organization that would drill these shallow wells, 12, 15 feet throughout town, and it was affordable for people to begin to use those to water their lawns, that would make a big deal. We might need to have some sort of like they should have a sense of the geography of town and what areas where there's more concentration of water close to the surface and what areas that are probably not going to be that way. But maybe we could then, come up with some kind of a map, and then we could say, look, you're in an area where if you put a well in, and we could get you a well for $99.95. We could get you a well for this price, and you could use that to water your lawn. I think that would probably be the best way to do it. Another thing that is probably less likely, but also possible, is that gray water use. I mean, when people wash their clothes, I mean, they're putting out, you know, 20 gallons. I don't even know how many gallons, but gallons
It'll cost you thousands of dollars to capture it.
to capture the gray water. Well,
How do you separate the sewage from your washing machine from your house sewage and put it on your? I mean, it's impossible.
well, it comes out of the washer. It's gray water when it comes out of the washer.
Right,
So
but now you got to pipe it to your lawn.
you have to pipe it to your lawn. If there was a system that would do that, that would be wonderful. But it's not out there that I've ever heard of. I
The
know
country of Israel does it for the whole country, but we're not going to do that.
well, we got to get some Israelis over here to help us figure this out, because that would, I mean, unless we take some drastic measures like using gray water in wells, we're going to be in trouble, because the people who are using a lot of water, I don't think they care if the rate goes up. They're like, okay, water's one of the cheapest things I get from the town, and if it's twice as much, they might say, I don't care. I mean, the people in Weston, if they double their water bill, they would not even think twice.
So have we talked to the people in these 5 other towns that are using over 100 gallons per person per day?
Not yet. I just pulled that report before tonight's meeting.
I mean, is it worth finding out if they're doing anything? And I think, Tom, you alluded to this. Is this a letter we get once every 18 months and we've been getting it for the last 10 years? Or is this a new initiative by the DEP?
No, so I did have DPW take a look at that, and this is the first occurrence of us receiving this type of notice with a date on it, to have some concrete measures in process. I am not surprised, and I think it's only going to continue to grow from there. I mean, water is a precious resource, and while it may be abundant in our area right now, who's to say that it's going to stay that way in the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, the struggle out west, we are not immune from that potentially happening here with the warming of the climate. So I do think the responsible thing is to try to take some steps now and begin that process. And certainly, the ones I identified, the quarterly billing and a bylaw draft and public education, those are fairly quick, easy things that we can do. But I do think we need to have a stronger conversation about tiered rates.
Well, this isn't going to happen by September 1st by just giving it to Lynn. I think that, I mean, part of our responsibility as the water and sewer commissioners, I think something's got to be done to get a group of 2 of us to go off and come back with the town manager and some recommendations. I'm sure we'd include Pete Thurber or somebody from the DPW as well, the water department. But something's got to come back, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, we could split up some of these things. Is there anyone who would be interested in something specific like the wells or gray water? Anybody have family in Israel? They could call. I wish I did. But
there's a great book. It's called Water, and it explains everything that's been done in that country. It's an amazing book.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I don't think we're gonna. I think we've just got to lay out a plan to get back to the DEP. I mean, September 1st is coming pretty quickly.
Right. So, we are. Tomorrow's election day. We'll have a new board member. So obviously, we'll just tell them it's their job to do. I hope he's not watching. But no, we could look at assignments of committees for the new year, and we could put together a committee for that. Unless someone wants to volunteer at this point.
I would say, Mark, I do believe that if we acknowledge the fact that we have this issue and we're going to address the issue by September 21st, that's what the state needs to hear. The state doesn't need to see a detailed plan by September 21st. They need to know that we're on it. And I think we can do that as we move along through the summer. And we might be able to get a detailed plan by the 21st. But I think if they say, we understand that there's a problem, we're going to address the problem, here's some possible solutions to the problem, I think that will solve Won't solve the problem, but it'll take care of the state by the 21st of September.
Right, so we need to submit a proposal. That's what they're looking for.
We will respond to the letter outlining the steps that we are going to take and knowing full well that not all of these steps will be completed by September 1st, but they want acknowledgement that we heard them and that we are building a plan to address it, to try to lower that per capita use.
And just remember, the data that we had, this is going back to what Richard Foster and I did, shows that, you know, it's only 5 or 10% of the houses that use a large percentage of the water in this town. You know, we don't have to go after 5,000 different residents with the approach. It may be really targeting, you know, just a few hundred, you know, that, and we can look at that data again. But my suspicion is, from what I recall, you know, if we got the top 50 or 70 users to cut their water use substantially, we make a big dent on that 120 number.
Well, that's good data. And the other side is that we should have citizens in our community who are concerned about water use, who would definitely want to step forward, and I hope they're listening tonight, to be part of a special task force to look at water use and more meeting the expectations of DPO. So, okay, good. Next we have to do is we have to set our sewer. We have a sewer rate proposal and a water rate proposal, and they give us a list. It goes from 2011 up to date, up to 2022, and so I don't know if this is something that Lynn, do you want to speak to, or Paul Sturzik, or?
Yeah, I will address it. If we're looking at the sewer rate, I mean, both the water and the sewer rate calculations are based upon the same mathematical equations. What I tried to do is portray the uses, which are basically the budget that has already been approved at town meeting, broken down into a number of sections, being the salaries, expenses, the Springfield charges, and what we have for debt service. That is really the amount that we need to cover, unless we're adding some other amount for capital reserves. But that is really the amount of revenue that we're looking to cover through the ancillary sewer charges and through the sewer rates. You notice in the very last column of the sewer rate worksheet that we need to raise $2,262,000 and some change. Some of the ancillary revenues that do come in is we do have a collection charge based upon meter charges, based upon meter size, I mean. We do have some interest revenue come in. And there's some other ancillary charges that come in over the year. Those ancillary charges, ancillary revenues total about $304,000, which would leave us an amount to be raised by rates of $1.959 million. And then from there, it's a simple mathematical equation. We looked at billable units over the last number of years. We've used 595,000 billable units in the recent history, and the mathematical equation would come up with a proposed rate of $2.82, which is a substantial increase from FY 2001. But if you trace it back, and you'll see that the increase is really traceable back to the charges that Springfield is charging us. When we compare the FY 21 budget to the FY 22 budget, there's a 14-cent raise just in the amount that is attributable to the Springfield charges, while the actual increase in the proposed rate is 16 cents. You can see that everything else remained relatively stable, with the exception of the Springfield charges. So again, it's more a mathematical equation than anything, in my opinion. The water rates are done in the same fashion. I guess the other thing that I would say is, again, we're not raising any more money for capital reserves. The projected retained earnings at the end of FY 21 going to be about $727,000. It's probably a conservative estimate. It's more than likely going to be a little bit higher. So we certainly have enough in our estimated, our retained earnings account. Our minimum policy amount is 500,000, so we do have a few extra dollars in there. Should the board want to decide to use some of that to offset the rates, that's certainly a possibility. That has not been done in the recent past for the sewer charges. It had been done for the water charges back in 2018, but that is a possibility of potentially lowering the rate to some degree by the uses of those retained earnings.
Okay, Paul, thank you. And so, again, it looks like the Springfield charges, were pretty consistent for a few years at 600,000, and then it's gone up, close to $50,000 each year, and maybe more last year. And is that going to continue? Are we going to see these jumps of like $50,000, $70,000? You think?
I believe so. They send the DPW estimates annually of what their expectations are. I don't recall seeing one this spring, quite honestly, but I know seeing them last spring, again, they're on a huge capital program for both water and sewer. So I would anticipate there are going to be increases in those sewer charges, at least for the next few years. But again, that's something that information probably in Jeff's hands that he has that would have come right from the water and sewer, Springfield Water and Sewer Commissioners. I just did not see it, the most recent one, which would have probably come in March of 2021.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Paul. Mark Gold.
Yeah, Paul, thanks for doing this. I appreciate you doing this every year. Every year I take another look at it. One of the things that, I'll just talk about the sewer first because you alluded to this. Our sewer retained earnings is projected to be $727,000, which is, $227,000 more than our target level of 500,000. And all that means is that we missed in our estimate, I think, of how much we were going to be billing for last year, and we have some additional money. And so based on that, what I was thinking is we take, the difference between if we're 227 or 228 over our target, we take half of that and use $1,000, and surprisingly is the same as last year's of 266. And I'd love to be able to keep our sewer rate the same as last year, especially since it looks like that we've got these retained earnings to do it. A, and B, we can do it through addressing our the capital expenditure, the debt service part of our bill, and not necessarily the operating portion of our bill. And more importantly, it only uses half of what I would consider the overage of our sewer retained earnings fund between where our target is of $500,000 and where we are now of 728 or 729. So by using half of that, we could do some rate reduction.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the board? Yes, Steve Morantz.
I want to know if Paul can make that calculation now. In this,
yeah, I actually have the spreadsheet up. So if I plug in that number of $115,000 for use of retained earnings, Mark, I come up with the rate drops to 2.65. It actually goes down.
Well, let's make it 266.
Right. So if I put in 110,000.
Yeah, something like mine came to 266 and 265 and a fraction.
Yeah. So like I said, if I plug in simply $110,000 into the equation, it comes out with level $2.66.
So as you're ending, but you're still a chief CFO in terms of those numbers and what we've got for sewer retained earnings and using some of this stuff to reduce sewage rates, are you comfortable with that kind of calculation?
I would say that my preferences would be to put the rate up slightly. And I only say that because you are always going to have water and sewer projects that come before you for capital. And, you know, you do want to maintain or, you know, stay away from bonding if you have enough money in the sewer retained earnings. So I personally would feel more comfortable if it went up maybe a 1.5% or 2%, quite
So
honestly.
you're looking like 270, 272, something along those lines?
Yeah, something to that nature.
Can you live with that, Mark?
Yeah, obviously I could. I mean, I was trying to keep it even, and you know, the question we always have, Steve, is the retained earnings. The goal is 500,000 with the 110 proposal, 110,000. We're still at 610 or 615, and we're going to be probably adding to the retained earnings over the coming year. It's not like we have capital sewer projects right now. If we did have capital sewer projects, I would propose that we pay for that out of the retained earnings. But in fact, we're already doing that. Paul's already taking 371,250 out of the retained earnings for sewer capital. So that's why I thought we could kind of survive having level funding, because it still gives us a pretty healthy increase in our retained earnings and gives us a healthy margin over our target level of $500,000. Paul's a very conservative accountant. That's what we pay him to do. I'm looking out for the residents and trying to level fund their sewer bills.
Okay, and but the other side is that Springfield isn't really looking out for us, and it's probably going to go up by $50,000 again next year, and then if we had to raise the rate significantly next year, you know, I think Paul's suggesting that we go halfway up this year, and then maybe the other half next year might be a safer bet. Is there any other comments from board members?
I'm assuming, you know, we're going to go on quarterly billing as
Yeah.
soon as feasibly possible. And in terms of if we get to this winter averaging, I assume that also means that will be an increase in sewer rates. Is that sort of, that's what's going to happen?
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, it's not, you know, we don't want to go from A to Z. I think what Tom suggested is, you know, a modest increase, modest. But if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And then we might want to use retained sewer earnings as that increase hits, you know, come when we go winter averaging. So, but both of those in terms of Lynn and Paul, more Lynn than Paul, that's still the game plan. I mean, we did vote for that, so I assume that is going to happen.
Okay, because we can also, we may need to do the same thing next year to keep the rates from looking.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Just as an example, if I put in $80,000 worth of retained earnings, the rate goes to 270, 4-cent raise or a 1.63% increase.
Okay, 170. That sounds good to me. I don't know what other people think. So yeah, I would like. I'd make a motion that we raise the proposed sewer rate to 2.70.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Mike?
Mr. Lacusa?
Yes.
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Morantz?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
You put a reluctant yes, but yes.
So now we move to the document on the water rate proposal. Paul, you want to bring us up to date on this?
Sure. Again, it's the same methodology. Again, look, utilizing the uses. We have the budget broken down to salaries, expenses, the Springfield charges, and then the debt service. The good thing here is that the Springfield charges are not going up by a great amount. They're going up by roughly $40,000. I have not included any money to put into reserves for capital, anything to that nature. Afterwards, we have a total amount that we need to raise of just slightly over $3 million in order to cover that budget that was approved in May. We do have ancillary revenues coming in. We have a distribution charge. Roughly that brings in about $108,000. We have interest revenue and some other work that the DPW does that brings in some amount of revenue. The total is just over for about $203,000. And in this particular case, the amount that we would need to raise from rates is $2.8 million. And again, we have a 5-year average that we looked at last year and came up with a $792,237 billable units. And the good news there is just looking for a 1 cent increase on the water side based upon those billable units in the current budget. I will also say that given the dry year that we've had, the water retained earnings has really jacked up pretty well, where we were underneath our minimum requirement at the beginning of the year where we had $217,000. We're looking at excess revenues this year based upon the water consumption of about $675,000 and just a few other things that will probably peak our retained earnings at the end of this fiscal year somewhere in the vicinity of $870,000. But again, I have not used any of that, seeing that a 1 cent raise in the rates would hopefully be acceptable, but that's kind of the summary based upon the same methodology.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And given all that, I just soon start with a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the 1 cent rate increase for water. I think someone just care to second that.
I'd like to have a discussion.
We can still discuss it, but
No.
I'd like the motion on the table.
I second the motion.
Okay, because I don't think we need to discuss too much about 1 cent. But Mark, you got a couple minutes.
Well, the issue isn't the 1 cent. The issue is the $870,000 in our water retained earnings. I mean,
but we can talk about this for a long time.
Well, I understand that, Tom, but the point is that if you look at this, we overbilled people by $370,000 last year. And so last year's rate, one could argue was $370,000 too high because we wanted to bring our retained earnings to $500,000, but we brought it to $870,000. And so to say, well, we'll only go up a penny, to me, what we ought to be doing is that, first of all, the difference between going up a penny and not going up a penny is a total of $7,500. So it's not a big deal whether we go up the penny or not. But to some people, it's a lot of money. The fact is, we overbilled last year by $370,000, and we need to figure out what we're going to do to address that issue. Right now we don't have any major pending water capital projects, but if we did, we ought to be paying for them out of the water retained earnings, and not capitalizing them or borrowing against them and then paying for it against our water rates. But we're not in that situation right now. So I think people just need to understand, when your retained earnings go up, up by $675,000, either we miscalculated or it was a super dry year and we just used a lot. But we ought to be compensated.
Okay.
Mark, I do want to say I do believe it was a super dry year because the consumption was way up. I don't think it was really a function of the rate as opposed to the consumption. That's an average consumption, but the amount that we build, I don't have that number, but the amount that we build in FY21 was remarkably higher than than what we had anticipated with the rate. Again, based upon consumption.
So Paul, can I just follow up on it? So if we really if that's the case, and I believe it's the case, I thought we said we were going to use a 5-year or 8-year or whatever running average of actual usage. So shouldn't we be adjusting this year's volume upwards a little bit?
Well, yes, you could argue that, because I did not actually update that that 5-year average. But yes, you could certainly make that modification. That would be true. That that amount would go up, the billable units,
which would in effect lower the
which
rate.
would in effect lower the rate.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, we have a,
Jeff McGowan wanted to say something.
Jeff, please. Latest.
I just wanted to make one point. I think if you lower the rate, you're gonna get DEP's IR raised up a little bit further. I'm not saying you need to increase it, but I think lowering the rate is going to make them a little bit more ornery to deal with.
Good.
The other thing that I'll say is this may only be a temporary rate if you start looking at tiered rates sometime in the near future for the second half of the year. This potentially may be amended at some time by the water and sewer commissioners during the year.
Okay,
Yeah.
another good point, and we'll be lost without you, Paul, trying to figure it out. But we thank you for your help with this. Can I call the question for the vote on the 1 cent increase? Okay, hearing no disagreement. Mike, will you do a roll call vote?
Mr. Lacusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Okay, so it passes. This is the end of our.
We just need to go back because the motion on sewers was incomplete. It did not include a cap.
Oh, okay. We're supposed to mention the cap that has to be included in the motion.
It should be. It has been in the past, and we didn't include that. It's been the sewer has been capped at 200 units annually.
220.
220. Sorry.
220. Okay, so that's the motion. We have a second.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Mike will do a roll call vote on that motion.
Mr. Lacusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, our next meeting will be July 6th. And I, this will be the last
Mr. Lacusa, there's still a few things on the agenda.
You think? Oh my God. What is it?
We have the general obligation bonds and then finance deposit limits and then the schedule.
That's right. Okay, so discussion of let me just see here. Oh, the obligation bonds. I'm sorry. I thought that this was over the thing. So Paul, our obligation bonds.
Yeah, the town sold $2.1 million worth of bonds last Thursday. We ended up with a true interest rate of 0.926. The bonds had an average, all the bonds, there were 5 different authorizations, which I will mention in a second. But the bonds in average had a lifetime of 5.13 years. Those authorizations that were included in the $2.1 million included $777,000 for the Farmington Avenue water mains, $433,000 for the Birch Road water mains, $300,000 for the Converse sewer work that's about to begin, $510,000 for the Pondside culvert, and $200,000 for the Magnolia replacement of some, must be a failing culvert in that particular area also. The one thing that I will also say is that there were premiums that were received in certain bond authorizations where the vote included premiums to reduce the amount of the authorization that was at, or I should say the amount of the bonding. We actually applied those premiums towards the reduction of the principal. But in certain areas that language was not in the bond authorization, and in which case those premiums would then be applicable for use in the future for other capital needs. So when we do the capital program for FY23, it's another source that can be used for the capital program for these water and sewer projects. As an example, I think there's a good amount of money, about 71,000 will go into the water fund for these capital needs, 30,000 roughly for sewer, and about 110,000 for future stormwater projects will go into and be reserved for future capital projects.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Any questions for Paul? All right, now we have a motion for our clerk, right? This looks like this. And we need to process this and vote on this tonight, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Clerk, Steve Morantz, you're on.
I, the clerk of the select board of the town of Long Meadow, Massachusetts, the town, certify that at a meeting of the board held June 21st, 2021, at which meeting all members of the board were duly notified and at which a quorum was present, the following votes were unanimously passed, all of which appear on the official record of the board in my custody. Voted. The sale of $2,105,000 general obligation municipal purpose loan of 2021 bonds of the town dated June 28, 2021, the bonds, to Fidelity Capital Markets, Division of National Financial Services, LLC, at the price of $2,477,340.12. And accrued interest, if any, is hereby approved and confirmed. The bond should be payable on May 15th of the years, and the principal amounts bear interest at the respective rates as follows. I will just go on to further voted that in connection with the marketing and sale of the bonds, the preparation, distribution of notice of sale and preliminary official statement dated June 9th, 2021, and the final official statement dated June 17th, 2021, the official statement, each in such form as may be approved by the town treasurer, be and hereby ratified, confirmed, and approved and adopted. Further voted that the bonds shall be subject to redemption at the option of the town upon such terms and conditions as set forth in the official statement. Further voted that the town treasurer and select board select board be and hereby are authorized to execute and deliver a continuing disclosure undertaking in compliance with SEC Rule 15C2-12 in such form as may be approved by bond counsel to the town, which undertaking shall be incorporated by reference in the bonds as applicable for the benefit of the holders of the bonds from time to time. Further voted that we authorize and direct the town treasurer to establish post-insurance federal tax compliance procedures and continuing disclosure procedures in such forms as the town treasurer and bond counsel deem sufficient, and such procedures are currently in place to review and update said procedures in order to monitor and maintain the tax-exempt status of the bonds and to comply with relevant securities laws. My goodness. Further voted that any certificates or documents related to the bonds, collectively the documents, may be executed in several counterparts, each of which shall be regarded as an original and all of which shall constitute one and the same document. Delivery of an executed counterpart of a signature page to a document by electronic mail in a PDF file or not too fast or other electronic transmission shall be as effective as delivery of a manually executed counterpart signature page to such document. Electronic signatures on any document shall be deemed original signatures for the purpose of the documents and all matters relating thereto, having the same legal effect as original signatures. Further voted that each member of the select board, the town clerk, and the town treasurer be and hereby are authorized to take any and all such actions and execute and deliver such certificates, receipts, and other documents as may be determined by them or any of them to be necessary or convenient to carry into effect the provisions of the foregoing votes. I further certify that the votes were taken in the meeting open to the public and that no vote was taken in secret ballot, that a notice stating the place, time, date, and agenda for the meeting, which agenda included the adoption of the above votes, was filed with the town clerk and copy thereof posted in a manner conspicuously visible to the public at all hours in or on the municipal building that the office of the town clerk is located, or, if applicable, in accordance with the alternative method of notice prescribed or approved by the Attorney General set forth in 940 CMR 29.03 to be at least 48 hours, not including Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays.
Okay, do we have a second? Or do we have to read this down?
Second.
Prior to the time of the meeting and remain posted, so posted at the time of the meeting that no deliberations or decision in connection with the sale of the bonds were taken in executive session, all in accordance with GLC 30A, whatever those there are, 1825, as amended, and all further suspended, supplemented, or modified by the executive order of the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, Chapter 30A, 20, dated March 12th, 2020. June
Thank
21st, 2020.
All right, and will you second this also, Mark?
Mark, yep, second.
Okay, so why don't we do a roll call vote, Mike? You do that?
Mr. Lakusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Okay. And so we have all these pages and certificate bonds. So can we move on to the discussion on the finance deposit limits?
Yeah, if I can just add on the bonds, there are a ton of signatures required. If people are voting tomorrow, to stop in and see Mike to sign all the paperwork.
Okay, we'll do that. That sounds good. Thank you for the reminder. And plus people can see that fine clock that we gave you, so.
Yep, there you go.
And Richard's clock. So,
And sign Lynn's contract.
so the discussion on the finance limits, deposits. So Steve Morantz, do you want to speak to this issue tonight?
Yes, I'll bring it up, but I want to make it quick. But as Paul mentioned, last time we had $5 million deposits for just, I guess, regular deposits, $8 million limits for bond proceeds. This is not required statute by any entity. It's our own statutes. Given where interest rates are, and the limits go from 0.3 to 1.5. Since these are self-imposed, I really think the town should increase those limits. I think whatever Paul's comfortable with is, we did have a conversation, 8 to 12, something along those lines. But, you get a couple $1 million to 0.5%, that makes a difference. And I do believe we are cheating ourselves by not doing this. And since Massachusetts really has, because of DIF, there are no, theoretically, they'll make us whole. I understand we don't want to put all the eggs in one basket, but these are banks that have been around for a while. I think by increasing these limits, we're doing the town a big favor. And I really suggest that if Paul gives us new limits that he's comfortable with, I think at this meeting or next meeting, we should approve those limits.
Okay, and so, Paul, is this, to make this kind of a change, is this just a board?
Yes. Yes, this is a policy originally written with the help of the Finance Committee, mainly Peter Landon. And it was approved by the Select Board, so I would consider it a Select Board policy that if it's going to change, should have the approval of you folks.
Okay, and perhaps the Finance Committee?
I do have a meeting with them on Wednesday. I can certainly get their take on it.
Okay, that'd be helpful. Okay, thanks.
Tom, I was going to say that. I mean, I was on the board when it was adopted with very, very good reason, based on a lot of questionable banks at the time, and insurance or no insurance, not. So I think we ought to get input from the Finance Committee, at least get them to give us their best argument to maintain it.
Okay, good. Any other comments from the board? Okay, so we will look at this as a future agenda item to discuss further, and maybe have the Finance Committee, someone join us. So Paul, you'll bring that to them and run it down.
Yes, I will get their opinion on the matter.
Okay, great. And we need to set the fiscal year 22 meeting schedule, which is pretty predictable. It'll be first Monday and second Monday of the month throughout the whole year. Do I have a motion to accept the meeting schedule?
As long as it's the first and third Mondays, not the first.
Oh, first and third, yes, first and third. That's, the dates are on there. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, here none. Mike will do a roll call vote.
Mr. Lakusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Okay, so that brings us to the end. Our next regularly scheduled meeting will be July 6th. And we'll be reorganizing then, I would imagine. And will be done with my term as chair. And I just say that it was not the easiest thing I've done, but I really enjoyed it, and in a lot of different ways. I grew, and I'm walking away from this with a lot of respect for the other board members and realizing how well we work together, because we all have a different perspective that is valuable for the town. And so I thank the board members for putting up with me for a year.
I have a question, Tom, in terms of the do we have to meet before then to approve the cable contract?
I believe there's going to be one on the 28th, but I won't be there for that.
Well, wouldn't that be a reorg meeting since
I will not
Foster won't be here on the 28th. I mean, the newly elected select board person will be here.
If you guys reorg without me there, you can do that. I won't be there. So whatever you decide. Sometimes you reorg with a full board. It's up to you guys.
When was that meeting? I won't be around the 28th.
It wasn't posted yet. The license expires on the 28th, so we have to take some action, either approve or deny. And I'm waiting for comments back from Comcast. I should have those hopefully tomorrow or Wednesday, once the attorneys had a chance to look at them. We're on a very compressed timeline.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, I know it's very unlikely I'd be there. But all right. So good night, everyone. Thank you. And we'll talk to you soon.
we just need a motion to adjourn.
Good idea. We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay. Seconded. Okay, we'll do a roll call vote.
Mr. Lakusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for watching.